Okay, so I would like to call to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Monday, July 6, 2020. I want to welcome everyone, and I would be done a possible executive session from 5:30 to 6, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is a review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of the agenda items? Seeing none. Okay, we'll take item 4, comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. Are there any? Okay, Barb, service.
I've just got one. Every year when I come back, this year I came back, there were 2. I just want to remind you that I paid a lot of money for a water bill with 0 usage. And someday we may get to that. It is not a high priority right now, but I at least wanted to bring it up once a year and remind you that hopefully the water district was supposed to be doing something about this. And maybe if we ever get out of COVID, we'll be able to do something about this. Like I say, it's not a high priority for the city, but I want to mention it. And I figured, I could have given that money to the food shelf instead of to the water district. So just a thought.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements and the city manager's report. So Megan, do you have any announcements? Okay.
No.
No. All right, David?
Nope.
Okay, Tom, where's Tom?
I'll back up. I've got one announcement.
Okay.
Everyone, thank you. Boy, does Overlook Park look a whole lot better. So thanks to Justin and team. Excellent.
Yes, it does. Okay. Tom?
So one of the Boy Scouts that attended our meeting, I want to say a month ago, I did have a follow-up conversation so he could earn his citizenship badge. And he had an idea that I promised I would bring forward to the full council. And it has to do with dog excrement and little bags along the bike paths. He thinks we should increase the fine to $1,000 and not necessarily ever charge it, but people will be a lot more inclined to pick up after their dogs if there was $1,000 fee looming over it. So I just thought I'd put that out there as a suggestion from a very engaged South Burlington Boy Scout.
Do you know what the fine is now? Is there one?
I thought it was like 200. I don't even, it's not really enforced much, but it's not 1,000.
All right, we can take that into consideration. Tim?
Nothing to report. Other
Okay.
than I went to Overlook Park a few times during its repaving, and my only question is, where is the sundial? Where did it go?
We had to take it out, Tim.
Yeah, but where is it now? Is it?
Oh, I don't know where. You mean where is it physically? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you took it somewhere, and you're not going to put it back, right? Because you want to leave that circle open.
Yeah,
Do we have another park that we could put it in and mount it somewhere? Because it really is kind of nice.
I'll find out if we still have it.
I hope we have it because it's made out of like brass or something. It's pretty heavy metal. Heavy metal, get it? Yeah.
Well, that's your favorite, right? Okay. Okay, I met with, as you know, Al, what's his name? I'm so bad with names, but from working with the Eau Claire property, and had good conversations with him twice. Paul Connors and I met with him as you had directed to think about some options for the Eau Claire parcel. Kevin and I also had a very good meeting, I thought, with, it was only David Young in terms of the city school meeting, and we agreed to have another steering committee prior to our council meeting on July 20th. And there's 4 agenda items. The reappraisal, kind of an update, because that does impact the school budget or revenue. He was going to update us on exactly what the school budget we'll be voting on looks like. we're going to update them on 180 Market Street, in particular, the, where we are. And I assume by July 20th, it'll probably be almost all finished, all the stormwater work that we did in their parking lot. And then have a discussion or an update on, from both sides about reopening both the city and the school. And he also announced, as you all know, that August 11th is the re-vote. So that was that meeting. Kevin, did I forget anything?
I think that was it, Helen. It's a good
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah, it was good. Is that everyone? Okay, Kevin? Tim, you didn't have an update, right?
I didn't, but can you hear me?
Yes.
The question is on the August 11th primary, there will be a Democratic sheet, a Republican sheet. Is there going to be a Libertarian sheet? And is there going to be a separate sheet just for the education vote?
You know, that's a Donna Kimball question. I
Yeah.
would assume there are separate sheets for all of it, and certainly because they
There
get
will-
reported
There
differently.
will
I mean,
be there's a progressive one, Helen.
Progressive one.
a progressive.
That's right. That's right. So
And I believe I read somewhere there's a separate one for the school vote.
Yeah, it would have to be, because it's counted separately
has
from
to be.
the other stuff.
Exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I got my postcard and have returned it, requesting all my ballots. I don't know if anyone else did, but, right, so that's en route. Kevin,
Thanks,
city
Helen.
manager's report.
And thanks for the reports from council members about Overlook. It really is looking nice up there. Team did a great job.
It looked like that before. It didn't take a whole lot to make it look great, but it does look great. So again, in case you weren't on earlier, Justin, thanks for facilitating, coordinating. It looks terrific.
Thank you, David. That's where I was going as well. Thank you, Justin, for getting this project done. I would say at that point, I was there today, and you'll note that the trees that are directly in front between the park and the house are obscuring the view somewhat. But there are other trees, including ones we've planted alongside the road there, that are going to be growing. And over time, the view from Overlook Park is going to be compromised. And so I think the council should recognize as we look to the plan for Underwood that the future replacement by way of viewing the view shed is really going to need to be Overlook Park, and making sure that the infrastructure is available at Overlook Park to accommodate the same sort of thing that we get at Underwood, the same sort of thing that we get at Overlook right now, because eventually those trees are just going to block the view. Anyway, fortunately, we have Underwood, and it's got a phenomenal view, and we control everything below it. So we'll never have the problem of something blocking the view. Anyway, thank you, Justin, for your work and your team's work in getting that done. City Hall is reopened to the public. We had about 25 people in here today, mostly to vote. 2 voting booths are set up with the separation needed. All public and staff, by the way, are entering through the main conference room, getting their, staff at least are getting their temperatures taken, and we have to do the checklist to make sure that we're allowed to come into the building under the governor's guidelines. Members of the public are asked about their symptoms, if any, and then allowed to come in to either meet with a staff person or to go in and vote, or to go to Donna's office for other services that she has. At this time, no member of the public is allowed upstairs, only staff, and no member of the public is allowed into the recreation side of the downstairs. And so that we see this as transitional effort, but over time, we'll look to restore normal access to the building. But I got to tell you, it's really great to have the staff back. About half of them were here. Another half will be here tomorrow. We're alternating, but it's good to have folks back. It's even Even good to have you back, Paul Connor, wherever you are in this, my view screen here.
Great.
We've gotten some complaints about masks not being worn in some places. David has, Councilor Kaufman has let me know of an instant or two where people are not wearing masks in public places. I've crafted a letter that will go out as either an email or a hard snail mail letter, hard copy letter that essentially reiterates what the council has mandated in your resolution and informs them that they have an obligation to make sure that people coming into their stores or businesses have a mask and are wearing it. Over time, I kind of think that the shaming that might go along with this or loss of business that might go along with this will help out and be the most effective tool. But for now, I'll be sending those letters out. So if you are hearing from constituents about this, let me know their contact information for the store in question, and I'll get something out to them.
Kevin,
Yes.
can I just interrupt on that topic? I did have a call from someone concerned about the lack of mask wearing by one of the postal officers at the post office inside. And so it took me forever because I didn't go to the post office for a really long time. But I went in the other day and I spoke to, I think, the gal who seems to sort of be in charge. And they're, just so people know, they abide by federal requirements, and the feds have not made it mandatory for postal workers inside or the carriers to wear masks. It's just recommended. She said that by and large, all of the indoor staff do. There was or is one person who didn't. She thought that it was related to a medical condition, but she said, this is our culture, and even the gal with the medical condition, she felt that the plastic wall that they build protects the public from her, little things that spray in the air. It doesn't protect her or her other co-workers, but I guess they're willing to deal with that. And the carriers, apparently none of them like to wear masks. So in relation to the issue that you had, Megan, I would suggest maybe the city can speak to the postmaster and identify some certain areas like nursing homes or residential housing developments where the carrier actually goes in to deliver mail, and maybe strongly encourage them or require them to wear a mask, or maybe come up with some other way to distribute the mail. But that's just a thought. I'm sorry, I'm done.
I know the postmaster and for the area, and I will reach out to him and have that conversation, Helen, and report back to you.
Thanks.
For the council's calendar, you have your regular meeting on the 20th of July. There will also be a steering committee meeting that night. So at 6 o'clock, the steering committee meeting will commence and go to 7:30. Then your regular meeting will pick up at 7:30 and go to its end. We'll try to keep the agenda for your regular meeting limited in duration. Also, however, I'm looking to set up a tour for you, the council, of 180 Market Street. And so what I'm looking to do is ask if you're able to meet at 5 o'clock over at the parking lot across the street, the Poon property, at 5 o'clock, wearing boots and some heavier boots if you have them. And I'll let you know what you need to wear. Justin's on, and I think he's working to try to set that up. Justin, what would they need to wear on site? At
5 o'clock, there will be no workers on site, so hard hats will most likely.
I can't hear you.
Slip-resistant boots, closed or slip-resistant shoes, closed-toed. Most likely hard hats will not be required, but if they are, we will have an ample inventory on property.
And
Right.
masks.
Thank you, yes, and a mask. They will take inventory and everyone's temperature and ask you a couple questions when you enter the site. So if we're aiming for 5, I would suggest arriving just a little early to get those formalities out of the way.
I think that this is
Thank you.
this is an important time for you to get over there before it's completely closed in. My understanding is some of the offices are actually starting to be created there. If you look, some of the installations going on the side of the building now, all the steel's up. So I think it's a really good time for you to go over and get a tour of the building and see what they're doing. So I'll confirm that, but count on 5 o'clock and then the steering committee and then your regular meeting. So busy night. The Summit Employers Health Center is opening day after tomorrow. So this is the health clinic for our employees and for the employees of VSAC and Twincraft and Hickok and Boardman. So we have a nurse practitioner on site and a technician on site. There is a small laboratory there, and they're able to do some lab work and also some pharmacy, pharmacological things are available there from the clinic. But we're opening it up to the employees on Wednesday. Every employee is going to get biometric screening to start with. What? They've got a very handy electronic connection app for our employees to use, so we're excited to finally get this going. And lastly, council had on your agenda for your last meeting the leases with Wheeler and Underwood for common routes. The Recreation Parks Committee really wanted to be able to weigh in on that prior to you approving them. And so the Recreation Parks Committee with Carol and with Tom and I on on Monday, I think it's the 13th at 5 to go through the lease and to get some feedback from the council so they can consider the 2 leases at a later date. I was up at Wheeler today. All the lumber is there for the project. The excavation has occurred. And again, Justin, to you and your team, thank you for your help with that. Concrete's about ready to be poured. They're getting the clay for the clay oven. It's quite a little project. You should run by and see it. And that's all I've got, Helen.
Okay, thank you. And I just forgot to add, Maggie Luger sent an email. I don't think it went to the whole council, but I can forward it to you. But she is needing to withdraw from her work, on the dog park committee due to some other, personal commitments. And I just, want to thank her publicly for all that she did. She certainly kept our feet to the fire and I think worked effectively with a lot of the public around citing and dealing with dog park issues. So I will miss her and I thank her. Okay, item 6, the consent agenda. We have 2 items, the disbursements, and then item B is approving the execution of a commitment letter and the legal documents necessary for the Vermont Bond Bank to issue to a general obligation bond of $5 million to be serviced with tax increment financing from the City Center TIF District. And this will be used for the construction of the South Burlington Public Library and City Hall as authorized by ballot November 6, 2018.
Helen, I do have a question regarding the bond bank
Okay.
certificate there. There, on the last page, there were figures that did not match the figures on every other page of this very long document. There were $416,663 payments on many of the documents going from 2025 to 2036. And then on, let's see, last page, let me just get there. It was 300 something. Let me just get there. Sorry. As you can see, it's a long document and I'm getting there. Here it is. So it's with different letter headers from the Vermont Bond Bank. And, you know, it had a nice grid and it was the executive director of the bond bank's signature. And after that page, they showed annual payments of $384,615.40 from 2025 to 2037. So I was just curious on why that Vermont Bond Bank Exhibit A and every other exhibit prior from the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank did not match.
Alana, are you on the call?
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
she's not. No.
The 384,615 are the annual payments pushed off till 2024 to reach to accommodate the $5 million of debt. That's the annualized payment with interest. So I'm not sure if I understand.
Yeah, but every other sheet in that packet has got a different figure for those years.
And doesn't include 2037. So these are smaller payments over, what is it? 12
An extra
years?
year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, was there an initial interest rate that was used as an example for the previous sheets, and then they nailed down the final interest rate, and that's reflected in there, or?
That I do not know. I tell you what, if you'd like to set that aside and come back and talk about that under other business, I'll try to get a hold of Lana and find out why if there's a discrepancy, really.
Okay.
It all adds up to 5 million, but.
Yeah, it's the payment is what you're saying, Megan, is the annual payment is just a little bit different.
And there's an extra year to make up the difference, basically.
I think it has something to do with the bond. This is why we're doing this now. I think the bond bank is giving a year of credit or of, I guess you would say, forbearance during C-19. And I think that's what the issue is. But let me try to get in touch with Alana and have that information for you when you get back, or not when you get back, but on other business.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So I will move to approve the what do we call it? The checks.
The consent
Disbursements.
agenda with A.
Disbursements. Thank you.
Disbursements.
I will
Yeah.
second that.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yep.
Any questions, discussion?
Elementary schools in the
All in favor? I'll call the roll. Tom Chittenden,
Aye.
Megan Emery,
Aye.
Tim Barrett,
Aye.
Dave Coffin,
Aye.
and the chair, Helen, really votes aye. So it passes 5-0. And we will take up item B, the Vermont Bond Bank documents at the end of the meeting. Item 7 is the presentation on the results of the Route 116 Tilly Drive study. And it looks like we have some people from the CCRPC and so I will turn over the presentation to them, or I guess Paul Connors has to do that, but
Lenny
as you
Churchill and
speak-
Christine Ford are here.
I'm sorry. It was
This is Christine. Should I?
Ford
I
and who
haven't.
else?
Okay, so Christine Ford is here.
Yes, and Eleni Churchill is
Good evening,
here, but
everyone.
Christine will introduce.
So you can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So my name is Christine Ford. I'm a transportation planner with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. We're here with David Saladino, our consultant from VHB, and Eleni Churchill, who's the CCRPC Transportation Program Manager. And we're here to present results from a study that we're calling the Vermont 116 Kimball Avenue, Tilly Drive Land Use and Transportation Plan. And just a little background, this was a study that was requested by South Burlington in 2016. It's funded with federal transportation planning dollars that come to CCRPC, and we spend them doing studies all over the county. And the purpose of the study, we'll go into, David will explain it to you, is to look at the development that's been proposed in the project area. We'll show you what the project area is in a minute, and just see what impact that has on the local road network, and kind of look at other multimodal and different possible improvements, so that as the development happens, it can be accommodated in a way that follows the visions that South Burlington has. So I'll introduce David Saladino. We'll go through the presentation, and then you guys, if you have questions, we're here to answer them. So David, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christine, and good evening, everyone. Paul, did you pass, am I able to forward the slides, or should I just let you know?
David, I have given you the authority to do that, so you should be able to do it.
Okay, all right, I feel powerful. So thank you. As Christine alluded to, this has been about a 3-year study, and so we tried to boil this down into kind of the key takeaways for this evening. And you know, we've got 30 minutes on the agenda, so want to dive into the presentation, but make sure to leave plenty of time at the end for questions, because I think the conclusions will probably spur some discussion and some further questions. So we can jump into that. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so the project overview, you can see on the right in the green highlighting is the project area. So we looked at generally from Kimball Avenue down to kind of the south end of Meadowland Business Park, and then from the Williston town line on the east side to about Kennedy Drive on the west side. It's approximately 900 acres in total for the study area. Obviously bisected by I-89, and currently a mix of various land uses, with primarily industrial and office kind of on the eastern 2/3 and residential on the western 1/3. And then, as Christine alluded to, the idea here is coming up with a sense for what the development will look like in this area over the next 15 years or so. And then how the transportation system can be accommodated, or how the transportation system can accommodate that growth and still adhere to the vision and goals from both the regional and the municipal comprehensive plans. So we'll just jump right into kind of the first assessment. And this is, these next couple slides are just kind of a high level overview of how different regulatory plans view this area. And there's some consistency across the different plans. So this first one is looking at the regional plan, the CCRPC's ECOS plan. It's a little bit blurry, I understand, but the gray boundary is essentially the project study area outline. And really the only thing to note here is that the study area is primarily purple with a little bit of red. And those, the purple is the CCRPC's enterprise zone. And so the idea here is future concentration of employment within the purple area. The red being the metro zone. And so that accommodates a mix of housing and jobs in a compact development pattern. And so that's kind of the regional perspective at kind of what would be happening in this study area. Then if we move down to at the municipal level, one lens that we look through is zoning. And so this is, again, the red outline here is the study area. And you can see the zoning districts that comprise, that make up the study area. And as noted previously, kind of the eastern 2/3, a mix of industrial, commercial, and open space. Then the western 2/3 residential and some limited retail, primarily on the O'Brien farm. From the comprehensive plan standpoint, the graphic on the right here is the future land use and kind of density of future land use. And again, primarily looking at the colors here within the study area, you can see most of it is in that bluish purple, which is indicative of medium to higher intensity development, principally non-residential. So that again aligns with some of those previous regulatory plans that encourage that level of intensity, with more skewing towards the industrial and commercial side. And then the western lands, primarily kind of west of Heinsberg Road and the O'Brien Farm, in the medium intensity residential to mixed use category. One other look here from the comprehensive plan. This looks at projected maximum build out. The blow up on the left shows the study area. The purple triangles, purple squares indicate the anticipated maximum build out capacity for non-residential floor area. And so you can see quite a few larger of the purple squares, which indicates, greater than 100,000 square feet potential within those parcels. And then the green shading indicates potential for kind of additional dwelling units. And here the O'Brien Farm parcel is in that dark green, so 100 to 400 units. And then lastly, just looking at from an infrastructure standpoint, this is the current official map. And just to note some of the things in this location, many of you are aware of these. The current official map includes the things noted in yellow text. So the I-809 interchange at Heinsberg Road, the Swift Street extension, Tilley Drive extension, and then a connector road between Tilley and Kimball Avenue. I will note before we jump in that we did not assume all of those were in place as we move forward. We'll talk about how we kind of parsed out the different scenarios that we looked at, but just as a point of reference, these are currently in the official map now. So then I just wanted to highlight some findings from a public online survey that we conducted. This was done back in 2017, but I think the kind of high level takeaways are still relevant today. And so you can see about 300 total responses. About more than 75% of those respondents lived in South Burlington, with 39% living within that project area, and then almost half living within South Burlington but outside of the project area. We asked what types of land uses we'd like to see encouraged or discouraged in this area. Probably not surprisingly, parks and open space was by far the leading contender here. But then looking below that, you see single family homes, office space, medical offices, kind of all coming in, and multifamily housing kind of as a close second in terms of encouraged. And then on the other side, hotels, services, and light industrial all showed kind of in the discouraged side of the scores. We also asked people to rate or to rank transportation enhancements, which elements they'd like to see included as we look to as this area builds out. So the connected network of sidewalks and bike paths in this instance scored the highest. The new interchange at Route 116 was ranked second. Jumping down one, the expanding exit 13 interchange ranked number 4 on this list. And in between those was some additional public transit, supportive infrastructure, and more frequent transit service. So that's just kind of framing kind of the public sentiment at the time. What we took that at the time back in 2017 was to then ask, we kind of put together some hypothetical packages of improvements. And we intentionally skewed them in one of 4 different kind of characteristics to see how the public would view each of these. And so won't go into detail in each of the packages, but package 1 was kind of a multimodal package of improvements. So public transit, bicycle and pedestrian amenities. Package 2 was more focused on just connectivity of existing streets and paths, not so much on new construction of new paths, or really focus on public transit. So a slightly lower cost than package 1. Package 3 looked at a new interchange at Route 116, as well as expanding the exit 13 interchange. So this was the most expensive of the 4 packages. And then package 4 was really focused on kind of maintaining the system without really much new infrastructure. And so when we looked at the scoring, it was kind of interesting, fairly evenly spread across the 4 packages. The multimodal package, number 1, was the top score for South Burlington residents who lived outside of the study area. So the majority of the South Burlington residents chose that package. For people specifically living within the study area, they chose package number 2, which looked at connected streets and paths. And then interestingly, the top score overall, and number 1 for people outside of South Burlington, was the interchange access at 34%. So from there, we then pivoted and working closely with the CCRPC and Paul Connor and Justin Rabideau to look at kind of what does this mean and how do we want to look at growth over the next 15 to 20 years. Obviously, a lot of unknowns over that time frame. Not to mention the unknowns that have entered all of our lives in the last few months, but just in general, the pace and location and scale of development. So we had to make some assumptions about the characteristics of that growth. And so some of the assumptions that we looked at in terms of the overall land use. So when we look out at, in this case, we're looking at 2035 as our future year. What type of new growth happens over the next 15 years was largely driven by the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's demographic forecasts that have had review by each of the municipalities in the county. And so that was really used to set the growth outside of the green area. So the growth outside of the study area was driven really by those demographic projections. Then the growth within the study area was based largely on conversations and meetings that we had with representatives from each of the kind of primary properties within the study area. And we'll get into that in a slide or two. We did include these connector roads as shown under the bullet. So Tilley Drive, O'Brien, Midland Ave, and Cider Mill connector roads. Those were all assumed to be in place as we were looking at kind of how traffic would redistribute throughout the project area. And then we made one more important assumption on the mode share side, and this really came out of some of that public input that we received, really encouraging more use or discouraging single occupant vehicle trips and looking at ways to promote other modes. What we assumed was an additional 5% reduction in single occupant trips. And that's really to be justified, and we'll show in the next slide, through additional transit and bicycle pedestrian amenities, make it possible for fewer people to be driving themselves within this area. So to get to that 5% reduction on the transit side, what that is kind of equates to roughly is approximately 3 new buses to service this area. That's 1 new link bus to serve the Route 116 commuter route, and then 2 new buses or shuttles to add service frequency to existing routes. It's cut off a little bit here, but you can see in terms of cost estimate, about $1.2 million for the capital costs and about $600,000 overall operating costs to maintain that level of service. We look at the bicycle and pedestrian network. We essentially assumed that all of the major streets within the study area would have some level of either bike lane or multi-use path adjacent to those streets. And so to build out that network, we see the need for new multi-use paths on Heinsberg Road, Old Farm Road, the new connector between Tilley and Kimball, and then along Kimball Avenue. In this case, there is right now, and we've received comments from the public on this point, that I-89 acts as a fairly big barrier to walking and bicycle trips from the north and south here. So we assume that there's some level of accommodation, in this case, a new overpass over 89 to provide that connectivity north and south for people on foot and on bikes. And then the assumption is that as developments are moving through the DRB and development stages, that they are including sidewalks and connections to multi-use paths and to transit stops. So then, sorry, one more. And so rolling up, looking at the costs here, kind of at a planning level, we tally about $15 million in overall costs. About $2 million of that is a little more than $2 million for the new overpass over 89, with the remaining 12.5 to 13 million being for paths and sidewalks. So then as we move, that's kind of how we get to that additional 5% trip reduction. But for the remaining 95% of the trips, for the auto-oriented trips, we went through the process that we'll talk through here. So I mentioned earlier, we were guided the new trips that would be developed, or the development expectations here is still a moving target, you know, as time passes and these development plans refine themselves. We took a snapshot in time and had conversations with representatives from each of the yellow boxes shown on the map at the time. And you can see generally the total number of new trips that those equated to. Those representatives gave us kind of either square footages or estimates for number of new residential, new single family and multifamily homes. We then used kind of standard Institute of Transportation Engineers trip rates to come up with, you know, how many trips would that new development generate during the PM rush hour, so 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. You can see in total, if everything built out exactly as each of these representatives had indicated, we're assuming about 5,800 new trips during the PM peak hour. So that's obviously not all going to happen overnight, and some of that development may never happen or may change in character. So we wrestled with that a little bit as the project team, and where we landed was to look at these kind of 5 scenarios looking out over time. And essentially what we looked at is, of that 5,800, of the full build out of all of the development in the study area, basically looking at 1/3 of that development, 2/3, and then a full build out, with the assumption that different levels of transportation improvements would be triggered at each of those three stages. So the 5 scenarios that we looked at, or 6 scenarios, if you count the no build, we looked at no build, so no development in the project area, and then the 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3 build out of those new the projects in those areas. The first 3 scenarios did not include any connector roads or 12B or a Swift Street extension. The 5th alternative was a full build out with exit 12B in place. And in the last scenario was a full build out with the Swift Street extension in place. So lots of different moving parts here, and we'll kind of summarize those. But we did try to look at as many possible configurations to get some intelligence around, you know, the importance of, for example, a new interchange with 12B, the importance of Swift Street extension, and then just the overall kind of level of magnitude of the improvements needed to accommodate those trips. And so just in terms of the process, we added these trips onto the traffic network. We used the Regional Planning Commission's travel demand model as a way to allocate the trips out onto the network. We essentially, you know, as you add trips to an intersection, whether it's signalized or unsignalized, each trip adds additional delay, and the level of service, which is a kind of a proxy for the amount of delay at the intersection, gets worse and worse as you add more traffic to that intersection. And so we held VTrans's guidelines in terms of the threshold beyond which that intersection shouldn't be taking any more traffic, and we want to look at some enhancements, whether that's a new turn lane, whether it's going from a stop-controlled intersection to a roundabout or a traffic signal. And so we played around, we kind of iterated on that to make sure that all of those intersections were mitigated appropriately to meet those level of service targets.
Can I just interrupt and ask what LOS means? What does that stand for?
Yes, yeah, thank you. LOS is level of service, and
okay.
If you listen to a traffic engineer for more than a minute, they'll probably say level of service, and those are the letter grades A through F, which indicate kind of the level of service, or kind of the amount of delay at a particular intersection.
And is an A better than a D?
That's right. Yeah, A is essentially free flow, so very little traffic, or
Okay.
you know, yep. And then F is basically, you know, stop and go. Okay, so then just to kind of highlight and summarize some of the results here, and I realize that probably most people can't read all of the detail on the map here. So just to walk around the study area, these are showing once we've added those additional trips onto the network, what types of improvements would be needed to get us back below that level of service D threshold. And so if we look on Kennedy Drive, we see that there's enough capacity, that there's no additional need for improvements at Kennedy and Kimball, Route 2 and Kennedy. Heinsberg and Kennedy would need a signal optimization, so basically just staying on top of making sure the timings are working with the traffic volumes as they grow. Similarly at Dorset and Kennedy, optimizing the signal, and then Dorset and Swift as well, optimization of the signal. Here at Kimball and Community Ave, there is a new signal that will be going in the next month or two. So that will be in place, and that will accommodate much more traffic than the all-way stop currently. Then if we look down here, kind of south of the project area, so the Swift Street extension, which doesn't exist yet, but at that intersection, and then the Meadowland Business Park, we see there a need to add either a signal or a roundabout with the first third of development. So it's getting close now to needing a new signal or roundabout, so that first slug of a first wave of development would trip that need to look at either a signal or roundabout. Below that at Van Sicklen, similar story there. So with the first third of development, we see that tripping the need for either a signal or a roundabout. And then down at Cheese Factory, we see that at the 2/3, at the 2/3 build out. So at that level, we see the Cheese Factory and 116 intersection needing to look at a signal or a roundabout. The next slide, we're just going to zoom in on the blue rectangle to look at the intersections within the project study area. And so here we can see, so just looking around at the study area, the Route 116 and Tilly Drive intersection. This is essentially needing a signal now, and we know there have been some discussions about advancing, looking more closely at a signal here at Tilly Drive. Similarly at Old Farm and 116. We see this at the 2/3 scenario, looking at needing a signal or a roundabout. The intersection here with the cross connection between Kimball and Tilly Drive, we see that only needing a new signal or a roundabout if and when if 12B were to be advanced. The alignment right now has the northbound off-ramp basically kind of tying into Tilly Drive here at a signalized intersection. So if that were to move forward, there would need to be either a signal or a roundabout where this 21 is. And then up here at Kimball and Old Farm Road, also needing a signal. And we're aware of some activities going on now with the O'Brien Farm that will likely be moving that idea forward as well. So then maybe one of the more interesting things, or kind of rolling these things up into overall costs. There's a lot of numbers here, but just to break down the table, the columns here show the different scenarios that we looked at, and then across the different types of improvements that we were summarizing costs for. So this first column is that 1/3. So when you build the first third of development, what are those improvements needed to accommodate the transportation, or to accommodate the new trips generated by the development? Similarly, the second column shows with 2/3 of the build out, what additional things would be needed. And then these far right columns show the 100%, so the full build out. The base network is essentially without a Swift Street extension and without a 12B. So this is just the baseline 100% build out. What additional things are needed to accommodate the transportation needs? This is full build out with Swift Street extension, and this is full build out with 12B. And so going across here, we see this first row. These are all of the intersections, whether it's roundabout or signals, new turn lanes, optimization of the traffic signals. For planning purposes, we assumed that of the new intersections that were flagged on the previous two slides that needed a signal or roundabout, we essentially assumed that half of them would become signals and half would be new roundabouts, just for to estimate costs for those improvements. We've generated the costs here for the new connector roads, but noted that in many instances, those costs are covered by private developers. So this is not necessarily something that would directly impact South Burlington's municipal funds. Exit 12B, the new interchange, that gets its own row here, and it only shows up in that final scenario. You can see bicycle and pedestrian improvements. What we essentially assumed here was that these costs would be broken out over or phased over kind of whatever duration it takes to get to the full build out, essentially. So we assumed a third across those 3 time periods. And then a new overpass over the interstate for bicycles and pedestrians. We assumed that one would be not happening, tomorrow. So we assumed it would be in kind of that 2/3 build out phase. And then the public transit startup costs, we assumed that those would all happen in the near term. So down below, these total costs, so essentially what this is saying for the 1/3 build out, about $20 million of improvements in total. When you move up to the 2/3 build, this is a total number. So it's this 19.93 plus the additional here gets you to the 31 million. And then here with the 100% build out, 41 million. I tried to do is break out a little bit more to help you get a sense for kind of orders of magnitudes of cost, to break out some of the costs that would not typically be borne to the city would be on the hook for. So in this case, we removed the costs that GMT would be covering in terms of the capital and operating costs for the buses, and the connector road costs are removed from these figures. It is important to note that VTrans and Federal Highway will likely be contributing, if these projects are to move forward, some portion of the costs. Probably the biggest example, if Exit 12B were to move forward, there's likely to be, an 80 or 90% federal infusion or matched funds. Ideally, we would have a row here that would just show municipal costs, but because those percentages or the matches or how the city goes about getting funding for these is not known, we basically lump them all together into this blue row to show kind of total costs for each of these scenarios. And so you can see here about 33 million in municipal VTrans Federal Highway costs for the full build out without a Swift Street and without a 12B in place. So then just to get to conclusions, and then we'll wrap up here. The full build out is, as you mentioned, unlikely to happen in the near term. It's a fairly significant level of development, but we're likely assuming that there's going to be some incremental build out over the next 15 to 20 years. And so looking at ways to kind of phase those improvements to accommodate that growth. We found that the full build out, as we were just showing on the last slide, can be accommodated with those intersection enhancements, bicycle pedestrian enhancements and transit enhancements for about $41 million. Again, that does not include the Swift Street extension or 12B. We looked at the Swift Street extension specifically. Just a couple notes here. It certainly does facilitate east-west trips, and what we saw in the modeling is that many of those are through trips that are traveling, between Shelburne Road and Maple Tree Place, or somewhere in that location. So we see that kind of opening up more of an east-west connectivity. It does also provide enhanced emergency vehicle accessibility. It kind of helps that grid network in the southeast quadrant. At the same time, it does increase volumes on Tilley Drive. Again, that's kind of completing that east-west route. And also notably, it pulls volumes off Kennedy Drive, which is essentially a parallel route, by about a quarter, about 24%. And just looking at the numbers below in the table, you can see, so Swift Street today is roughly 125 trips in the PM peak hour, mostly people going to their homes. With Swift Street extension in place, we see that increasing, over 800%, up to about 1,200 cars during that peak hour. Kennedy Drive goes from 1,700 down to about 1,300, so that's that reduction of about 25%. And then Tilley Drive traffic would go up about 4%. The idea here, it certainly is, it would be a utilized facility. Whether the question, I think, is to the folks here in the room, whether that's a desirable place to have that connectivity happen. It's notable that Kennedy Drive has quite a bit of additional capacity. It's a 4-lane divided arterial, and was kind of built to handle a majority of the east-west traffic. And so in this case, by building the Swift Street extension, you're essentially drawing traffic away from Kennedy Drive to accommodate that east-west traffic. And then for Exit 12B, it certainly does provide the direct vehicular access to the study area. With the construction of an interchange here, there's an opportunity to enhance that bike ped connectivity without having to build a separate overpass. It can be integrated into the new bridge that accommodates the interchange. What we found in the traffic analysis is that 12B doesn't do a lot for traffic capacity in the study area. most of those trips are going to be utilizing one of the streets in the study area, whether they come in off the interstate or from other routes without an interstate in place. What we did find though is that 12B does help exit 12 in Williston and exit 14 fairly significantly. So with exit 12B in place, volumes at exit 14 go down by about 11%, and at exit 12 by 17%, as people don't need to use those exits to get to Technology Park or some of the other destinations in the study area. And then just to note, there is a study that's underway that I, myself and Eleni are working on, and I know that you've been briefed recently from Charlie Baker on the RPC's I-89 2050 study, and so this interchange specifically will continue to be evaluated as part of that process as well. So to end here, so recommendations. What we found is that lots of different permutations and moving parts, but there will likely be additional growth in the study area. And whether or not 12B or the Swift Street extension are built, the improvements identified, the first and second thirds of development, will be needed in either case. So it would seem prudent to advance those first tier of improvements into the scoping phase to get some more definition around costs and property impacts associated with each of these improvements. You can see the list of new intersection improvements, either signal or roundabout, and then the sidewalks and paths that are listed here. And then finally, integrating the recommendations out of this study as appropriate into discussions around the official map, the impact fees, and the capital improvement plan. So with that, I will wrap up and open up for questions.
Okay, I have one quick question. When you have identified this growth, did that include the additional housing that the ECOS plan sort of imagines for the southeast quadrant? Or was it just job growth or growth within the areas cited, the several yellow squares?
So everything outside of that green box that we were looking at, everything outside of that was based on the ECOS, the MTP, the CCRPC's demographics numbers. And so those are all consistent. Within the green box, they're much higher numbers because they were based on discussions with each of the property owners. And those numbers included both residential and non-residential units.
So outside the box is also future growth?
Yes, yep. Out to 2035.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
So I have a comment and then a question. One, this looks like a lot of expenses to the city, and I understand from a conversation with Joan Goldstein that the concept of a TIF, a tax increment finance district, has been employed in other states around transportation improvements. So with this growth, I would be interested, as this is a 10 or 20 or 30-year discussion, exploring with the state possible transportation TIF to pay for the public infrastructure that would accompany this growth and use the incremental amounts of tax increases, similar to how we have the TIF in downtown or the future downtown South Burlington. The question I had, that's just my comment, that as South Burlington looks at this going out, I think there's value in exploring a transportation TIF. My question has to do with that 860% increase on Swift Street. That I have to ask, and I'm not a transportation planner, but does that assume that we're going to make the road welcoming of that type of traffic, or are there models where we design the roads with bends, with speed bumps, with other traffic calming mechanisms, so that it serves our first responder requirements and needs, but doesn't necessarily attract the Kennedy Drive traffic that you and your model laid out? Is there a middle ground where, with proper planning, we could subdue some of that traffic to not be as much?
That's a really good question. That was something that we spent a good bit of time looking at and talking through. From a modeling perspective, we're somewhat limited in the assumptions. We essentially assumed that new roadway would be a 25-mile-an-hour road, and so the model uses that to constrain any of the trips that use it. We also tried to do somewhat of a circuitous, when we drew the link, we drew it not a straight line. So we tried to model that as good as possible. But what I think it shows, though, is that there is kind of a pent-up demand. So even with a thin pipe there's a lot of people that want to use that. We certainly, in practice, you could be using lots of traffic calming elements to get it even below that 25 and make it feel even less desirable. But but we did try to make, it's not a super highway going through there.
Any other questions?
Helen? Yeah, Helen?
Megan?
Yeah, I was curious if we could see the breakdown for exit 12B for the local residents and the outside of South Burlington residents. It was unclear to me how many people local to South Burlington were in that 36% in favor of 12B.
That is something I can certainly provide. I don't have it at my fingertips in terms of how many of each bucket voted for those totals, but I can provide that, tomorrow morning to Kevin, and he could circulate it to you if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I would like to know that. And yeah, I'm struck by the disconnect between the desire for more parks and 5,800 cars. We're at cross purposes here, and so I think just thinking carefully about the balance that needs to be struck is what I'm most struck by. And is exit 12 something that is considered too heavily frequented or used right now? Is there a need to reduce the traffic at exit 12?
Yeah.
In Williston?
I see Eleni nodding her head. Eleni, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so yes, there are issues at exit 12, and we actually did scoping for exit 12 some years ago as part of the circle alternatives process. It's been like maybe 5-6 years now, and there is a project that came out of that scoping study, which is going to be a DDI like the one that we are about to construct, hopefully at exit 16. So yeah, there is a project that is actually in the candidate list at VTrans that is going to actually improve, the congestion issues and the capacity issues at exit 12.
Yeah. And, I realize,
and can I just add one more thing, Megan? Is like, I think that those improvements are included in our model. So when, VHB was using the model for 2035, those improvements for exit 12, as well as some of the exit 16 improvements and some other ones that we have in our tip.
Yeah. And I'm thrilled to see that Dynapower has projected this growth. And I would assume other businesses there in Technology Park as well. What I would love to explore, because I don't have the answer, is whether or not the housing for the employees, the future and current employees of those companies, whether or not they could be right there across the street and really cut down on that traffic. I don't know if this goes against any kind of planning principle in this country, but it just, to me, I was surprised by the number of additional trips. I appreciate the desire for more paths for biking and walking, but I just have to say, just from the one meeting that I attended, people are very eager to keep that walking and biking along Route 116 as much as possible. So I just want us to really think about balance and how we can get to something that is livable for the residents, yet useful and dynamic to those businesses. That's where I am. And I'm sensitive to what Tom said about cost, municipal cost.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, but they're probably not relevant at this time.
Okay.
Just that the 12B seems to me to be a long-term investment that would pay off. I think a lot of people that live in the Southeast Quadrant spend a lot of extra gasoline trying to go south on 89. And this would offer a solution to that. And not that, going out of your way to get on an interstate is necessarily a bad thing, but you end up generating traffic, at exit 13 or 189 and then also exit 14. And so I thought that 12B was supposed to have a positive effect on 13 and 14, and improvements at 13 could help 13 and 12B as well. So
Mhm.
and my other comment is that it was great having that graphic, the picture of the dead windmill blocking the view of Mount Mansfield, because now that's 2 dead windmills on that property down in the industrial park.
I have residents always asking me about those. They would love to have them come down.
I would love to have them come down. I've asked the question before and I get dead silence from the owners. That's another day for another discussion. So,
Okay, well, bring it up again. We can talk about it later. Any other comments or thoughts?
I know that the
Yes.
residents at Dorset Park, the ones that I've talked to are vehemently opposed to connecting Brand Farm Drive, Swift Street Extension over to 116, which would effectively connect over to the Rye and to the southern part of the Hill Farm. So they've tried to get that official city map to erase that connection. They've had reservations since 2016 about it, and they continue to have that. And I understand an 860% increase, it's a model, it's a projection, but I'm sure that there are a large quantity of people that would like to cut off having to go all the way down to Kennedy Drive to get over to 116. Don't forget that Cider Mill 2 will have a connection to Cider Mill 1, which will connect to Dorset Street, but it's going to be a very slow roundabout residential, journey to get there with lots of left and right hand turns. And also don't forget that officially South Village is now connected to Dorset Farms. So there is a connector from Spear Street to Dorset Street, albeit again with a lot of twists and turns.
Okay, yes, that's a hand. Michael?
Yes, I pick up on what Tim said. There is another east-west connector between Shelburne Road and 116. But as Tim says, it's a squiggly way. And it's not only the residents of Dorset, the village of Dorset Park. I think every resident on Spear Street from Farrell on up is opposed to Swift Street extension. And there is an alternative. I've been told, well, we need it because of public safety and that sort of thing, access. I've been told that you could have that with a path, a bike and walking path, which is also access for emergency vehicles. You don't have to have a raceway going through there with 860% increase in traffic. I mean, it's a terrible idea. We're living in the 1980s here with this proposal instead of in the 2020s. We need to get our heads around less traffic, not accommodating more. If you make it difficult, they won't come. If you build it, they will come.
Okay, and I just saw a comment. The Natural Resources Committee hasn't weighed in on this plan either, and it might be good to present this plan to them as well.
Helen, Penny has.
Can I make a quick comment? Penny Tompkins.
Sure, Penny.
In the report, I was listening, and if I'm not mistaken, I understand the gentleman who had said that Kennedy Drive doesn't need much in the way of improvements to still help accommodate that 5,800 new trips. And so it feels like the Swift Street extension would just be, yes, it would take pressure off of it, but Kennedy was built for that purpose. So that's usually what I go back to is, we built a very big road to accommodate a lot more cars and to work well. So it was like mucking with what's working, even though other things obviously we do need. But Swift Street extension feels like I would join those people who'd like to get it off the map. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could I say one more thing, Helen, about the
Yes,
survey?
one more thing.
The survey in whenever it was 2017, there were only 325 odd respondents, and 75% of those were from South Burlington. That's only 240 odd. That is a very small number of respondents for such an important survey. If you're going to rely on the results, I don't think they're valid at all at that level of participation.
Okay. Yes, Sandy? I think.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is not taking a position on the Swiss Street extension at all, but having experience with an emergency access right next to my house that's supposed to be only pedestrians and bicycles, it's hard to keep, and the fire department has vehemently refused to have any kind of barrier whatsoever. Even though there are barriers in other developments in the city, it's hard to keep motorized vehicles off such pedestrian bicycle paths because they're wide enough to accommodate a fire truck.
Okay, thank you. Something good to consider.
Helen?
Any other comments?
Dave Crawford, can you hear me?
Yes.
Dave Crawford. As somebody that's interested in the Natural Resource and Conservation Committee very strongly, I appreciate your comment that at some point in the future, which is several months away, when the council gets us reformed and all that, it'll be a good opportunity to, we're pleased to hear your comment that says we should be weighing in at some future time.
Okay. Well, thank you Paul Connor, you have your hand up.
Hi, Helen. David Saladino gave an excellent presentation with a lot of information in it, and I thought that it would be helpful to just sort of, at least from my perspective, sort of summarize the two main takeaways from the study. And David, feel free to disagree, but just to sort of wrap this whole thing up, I think, you know, the key findings to me were that the Swift Street extension has a value in terms of emergency response, but from a transportation perspective, it would be drawing traffic off a thoroughfare, Kennedy Drive, that isn't at capacity. So it's sort of drawing traffic away from an underutilized major roadway. So that's sort of something to think about of when you consider whether to have that connection or not. I think that's one key takeaway. And then I think the second key takeaway that David mentioned is that David sort of built this series of improvements that would be that could be considered in terms of roadway connectors and intersections and bike ped improvements. And one of the key takeaways to me is that those improvements would be needed regardless of whether there is a 12B or not. So it would be needed in order to accommodate a scenario where 12B is not built. They would also be needed to accommodate the changing travel patterns that would take place if a 12B were built. So as you think about in David's last slide about sort of next steps and what to put on the official map and what to think about in the capital plan, those improvements would benefit either scenario of a 12B or not a 12B. Is that a good summary, Dave, of two key takeaways here?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It was excellent. And I think good presentations always elicit lots of additional questions, which is helpful and purposeful. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, we go on to item 8, appoint a representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Do we have a candidate?
Yes,
Oh,
Charlie
mine.
Baker. Charlie Baker.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, you're talking about Chris Shaw.
Chris Shaw.
Oh, I thought we did that already.
I thought so too.
That's why I was like, I don't understand what we're doing. Do we
Was this
need to do that again, Kevin? Did we just mess up in our process?
No, I mislabeled it on the agenda. It's supposed to be GMT.
Oh, okay.
You
So,
can correct that at your next meeting, but I mislabeled it on the agenda. It
oh,
should be
okay.
appoint representative
That's
to.
why I was a little confused. All right, so it should have been GMT. That's what I thought. Okay.
You can still
We
do
will
it. Helen.
take that up on the 20th. Or are people, do we have a candidate? I have one in mind, but I haven't spoken to him to see if he was interested.
I would move to appoint Charlie Baker representing South Burlington Green Mountain Transit to the Green Mountain Transit Board. Is that who you were thinking of, Helen?
No, I was thinking of Dan Albrecht.
So Dan, I spoke to Dan and I think he punted and directed to Charlie Baker, who sent some emails to Megan and myself. And Charlie Baker said he'd be willing and he would actually fit in very well on the board. 3 of his counterparts actually serve on Green Mountain Transit. The Lamoille County, Washington County, and Franklin County, Charlie Bakers, are on the Green Mountain Transit Board. So I think he would be a great voice for South Burlington. So that was why I would propose that we appoint Charlie Baker to the Green Mountain Transit Board.
Did you make a motion, Tom?
I did. I moved to appoint Charlie Baker to the Green Mountain Transit Board.
I'll make a second.
And he's not here, so that's even better.
Right. Is there further discussion? Well, if you said yes, that would be great. So if you're ready for that vote, I will call a roll call. So Tom Chittenden?
Aye.
Dave Kaufman?
Aye.
Megan Emery?
Aye.
Tim Barrett?
Aye.
Aye. And the chair votes aye. So Charlie Baker is our new GMT. And that's a year-long appointment, correct?
That's up for debate. Sometimes it's been 3 years. It can be a year. It's really at the pleasure of the council. There doesn't seem to be a defined term in either the charter or our policy.
Okay.
It is 3 years in the charter, I believe, but yeah.
Is it 3 years? Oh, good. So we've appointed him for a 3-year stint? Okay, great. Good enough. Moving on now to item 9. That gets us a little closer to being on time. So this is a discussion and possible council action on further investment in the conservation of property located in the southeast quadrant of South Burlington, known as the Eau Claire property. And we have several people who are joining us to answer questions. Brandon Bless and Alan Carnetz and Jacob Israelo also. I don't know if he's joined. There's a JI, so probably. And as you recall, what we discussed in an executive session was to consider and explore some possibilities on the Eau Claire Parcel B option. And Paul, Connor, and I met twice, and we talked about different options. And Paul has come up with a very nice sheet. I frankly haven't had time to review it this afternoon. I don't know if anyone else has, but Paul, do you want to just highlight that for us?
Sure. So let me just give a 20-second background for everybody here. So the 20-second background is that the city coordinated with Bread and Butter Farm and the Vermont Land Trust and Dirt Capital 2.5 years ago in 2018 towards the conservation of the Eau Claire parcels. There's 3 properties labeled A, B, and C. The Vermont Land Trust has conserved parcel A, which was the largest parcel on the east side of Heinsberg Road, and the state and federal entities have nearly completed the conservation of parcel C, which is the south side of Cheese Factory Road. That leaves parcel B, which is the one that the city participated in. There's a total conservation value of approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.8 million. And the city has contributed already a little over $600,000 towards its conservation. Al Carnitz is here from the Vermont Land Trust, and he can describe that the funding has been essentially secured, though not applied for, from the federal government, Natural Resource Conservation Service to match any non-federal money up to $915,000 or half of the total conservation value to complete parcel B's conservation. The question in front of council is essentially Vermont Land Trust submitted a letter to you last month asking for an additional contribution to help close that gap. I'm going to very quickly show a map and then we'll jump over to the options. Assuming that I didn't lose my map. Hang on 1 second. There we are. All right, so just to orient everybody very quickly here, parcel A, I already talked about in the right-hand side, parcel C down below. The other green parcels are ones that the city has participated in the permanent conservation of, and this one in the middle is what we're talking about, parcel B. So that's the quick orientation, and now I'll jump over to the options for council to talk about. As Helen said, we met, she and I met along with our various partners to talk about 3 options for council to consider. Option 1 is to take no further action. That basically, the city's already put in $605,000. The result of that, you know, I'm just sort of jumping to the key conclusions here, would be that the federal money that's available would be able to match that $605,000, and approximately 2/3 of the total 112-acre property would be able to be conserved. There's 5 acres in each of the scenarios carved out for 9 homes. So that's option 1, no further action. Option 2 would be to for the city to consider making a contribution of another $309,000 from the Open Space Fund. That number would total $915,000 total from the city, which would be the maximum that the Natural Resource Conservation Service has offered, and represents essentially between the two of them the entire conservation value of the property. So the result of that would be that the entirety of parcel B, except for the 9 homes, would be conserved for community agricultural use in perpetuity. We were asked by council in executive session to talk about what else would come to the community as a result. So there's a list of items in here that the parties have talked about. The form of ownership of this farm is going to be a new entity called the Vermont Agrarian Commons, which is based on a national model. It is more of a community-based ownership model that would allow for seats for the city to be an active participant in the management of the property. We talked about working towards and establishing land markets infrastructure for startup agricultural enterprises, essentially an incubator farm, similar to how the Intervale has operated. Commitment to partner with the city on recreation events, educational programming, completing the objective from the original agreement of getting 2 miles of trail access in and around the property, and extending the city's right of first refusal for the remaining 5 acres if we so choose. That's option 2. Option 3, which is not exclusive of option 2, it could almost be an option 2B. Council in the original vote was interested to see what could exist, what could a scenario look like that would have the city have some control over a portion of the land. So in this scenario, the city would contribute whatever the maximum needed to maximize the conservation value, and then work with the city funding and or other partners, if they can be found, to exclude some 5 to 8 acres for agriculture, for recreational use in the future. The tricky part about this is that any land that's excluded from the agricultural easement therefore becomes no longer eligible for the federal money. And so then that value needs to be made up by whomever is going to contribute that land value. In that case, there could be a public ownership, a public easement, whatever it might be for some piece of this land. It's hard to predict the exact amount of value, total cost associated with this, but our best estimates are somewhere in the range of an additional cost of $30,000 to $50,000 per acre would be the case in there. The original city investment might drop a little bit from that 310, but if there were, say, 8 acres, then that might be, 8 times 4, another $300,000 from the city and or other entities to complete this piece of it. So that's the rundown of the options in a quick nutshell for you.
Paul, the community gardens does not count as agriculture?
It does count as agriculture, so that would very, very much be able to be within any of the scenarios, but certainly in scenario 2, option 2, that the federal government would be fine with community gardens.
Other questions? I can't see any hands.
Yeah, I have a hand up.
Oh, Tim?
Yeah, so Paul, in option 1, don't we also still get the easement and the walking paths through the property?
There, the way that the agreement was written was that was sort of the overall objective was to create that. I suspect that in working with our partners, we would be able to at least get the connections as envisioned between 116 and the Scott property and over to the Muddy Brook. I think that the partners wanted to elaborate on that and show meandering paths that are able to go through the properties in a much more circuitous manner if there's able to be a full conservation of the property.
Because I thought in our previous discussions, we said that whatever option, we would still get, the connectivity with the walking paths and a gravel parking lot for some cars to park at.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of scale. So I think Al or Brandon, feel free to jump in here, but I think it's a matter of, is it a small parking area that goes directly, or is it something that sort of more fully creates walking trails in and around throughout the parcels as a way to sort of make the whole thing publicly enticing to walk through. Enhanced version of it, I guess, would be maybe my description.
And the federal government's okay with walking trails?
Al, I'll let you nod or shake your head on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're fine with the NRCS, or the federal government is fine with any of that public access. Absolutely.
Good. I don't know if Helen is still with us. Are you there, Helen?
It looks like she left, but she may come back shortly.
Yeah, her picture. So I'll just, as vice chair, fill in a little bit. Are there other questions from counselors about these 3 options? No. All right. The one question I had was with regard to the cost that you were talking about at the end there, Paul.
Yeah.
Where if we were to set aside land for playing fields, that would reduce our purchase price, but then we'd have to somehow recoup money in order to purchase those playing fields. I somehow you lost me in that description or explanation of how that funding was going to work.
Yeah, I'll try it again, but Al, please, maybe you can describe it better than I can. Do you want to take a shot at explaining it more clearly than I can?
Well, yeah, thanks, Paul. Real briefly. I mean, the federal money, the NRCS money, the 915,000, it's all based on these appraisals of conserving so many acres. So if we took out more land from the 112 conservation, there'd probably be a little less money needed because there's fewer acres. So there would be a little bit less money up front, but for the city to actually purchase, which I think that's what you'd want. You'd want fee ownership of these public recreation lands. If you're needing 2 to 3 more acres, there's additional cost for that. Is that
So it
am I
would be both
capturing that?
making up the lost grant funds because there's less money from the feds, and also buying it fee simple rather than just placing an agricultural easement on it. Is that a good description, Al?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
I'm
Very good.
sorry, I got blanked out and had to leave and come back in, so I missed that whole conversation. I apologize. I was frozen or something.
No problem, Helen. Actually, you didn't miss much because I don't know when you got frozen, actually. I saw your screen go black. But it was simply saying that the trails would be available in all 3 options with the federal government and I'm sorry for the acronym. Help me out, Al.
NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. Yes.
Right. The trails are A-OK with all of our partners. And then I simply asked them to explain again what would happen in scenario 3 if we wanted to set aside a bit of that parcel for playing fields. And that, by carving out some of the acreage, that we would get fewer federal funds. And so that we would have to, produce more money in order to purchase that land.
I wondered if Brandon wanted to talk or somebody speak a little bit more about the Vermont Agrarian Common and what that might offer the city besides membership on it. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me? This is Justin.
Yep. Yes.
Great. Yeah, so the Vermont Agrarian Commons is part of, as Paul mentioned, a national organization called the Agrarian Trust. And this is a new model for common ownership among a community of a land base and a nonprofit structure. So we actually formed the Vermont Agrarian Commons in May, and it's comprised of board members, including myself and Corey Pierce from Bread and Butter Farm, and then community members of and around the farm, including South Burlington residents, and then some other key members of the Vermont and local community, as well as the Agrarian Trust itself. There's a couple members on there. And so collectively what we're doing is working on fundraising for the transaction of the land once it's at its agricultural value, so at the point of conservation. And the land would be held in perpetuity in a community commons model, where we would have membership that includes, many members of South Burlington and Shelburne and surrounding towns, and really anyone who would like to join the membership. We would also have committees and other things which we've identified that leaders in South Burlington may want to take part in that, and that would be a great part of this agreement here. And in that, we would be structuring a 99-year lease back to the farm. That's kind of a template farmer tenant lease arrangement that all of the commons throughout the country have. So we're one of 10 or so commons around the country. And that would be a 99-year lease that would then also transfer over into any farms in the future, should Bread and Butter Farm not be the farming tenant at that point. So it's an innovative model to be able to hold land in community, have some control, access, and governance and input on what's going on that land while it remains in agriculture, open landscape, protected habitats, etc. On top of that, it's a model to help decommodify land. So it's basically taking land out of transactional and appreciation-based real estate markets forever, so that there would be no circumstance, envisioned anyways, where that land would then re-enter the marketplace. It would only enter the marketplace of, say, farmers and leaseholders and tenants.
Okay. Other comments or thoughts?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go
Hi,
ahead,
guys.
Chair.
Thanks. This is Cher Tai. I know some of you just jumping on board here. Just want to introduce myself to some of you and share that I am one of the people sitting on the board for the Agrarian Commons. Really excited about this model. I'm a South Burlington resident, and what really excited me about being asked to join this is the fact that we're going to hold this land in community, really giving this land back, you know, to the people, truly, and it's going to be held by members of our community in a trust, as Brandon just explained. You know, I think that this is a really big opportunity for South Burlington in terms of transferring this land to the community to make decisions about our trail networks, about open space, about being able to have all of our children explore this land, which I know you guys have done a lot of work on in the past. Also really excited about the recreational opportunities by putting things into the Agrarian Commons. And I also wanted to add, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but Bread and Butter Farm and the things that they're doing offer a huge amount of educational opportunity in South Burlington. They run Village School, which is an outdoor-based forest school at the farm. And those educational opportunities I see really expanding in South Burlington. And so I just think this is an incredible opportunity, and I just wanted to just kind of say hello, let the people know that I'm sort of part of this in case you have any questions. And I'm just really excited and hope that South Burlington can sort of support the full conservation of this property. I think it really is a benefit to our community. So thanks for considering and letting me share.
Okay, thank you. Dave Kaufman, I think, wanted to say something.
Tom, can you hear? Okay. Turn on your mic. And I'm curious because you have been the strongest proponent of ensuring recreational opportunities, what your recommendations will be on this. I'm just curious because I share your thoughts that recreation is tremendously important. So what's your thinking?
I like option 2B. My concern with the middle option is it doesn't retain the rights for the South Burlington residents, not just today, but for 50 years, 100 years from now. I would love to pursue the pathway where our dollars go for acquiring land fee simple, so that play space could be used by not necessarily our generation, but future generations. So I'm attracted to option 2B. I also, and I think this was introduced, there are other possible acquisitions. And so I do have some concerns that if we deplete the open space fund, it's going to leave us in a position where we won't be able to move on other opportunities. So that's where I am, Dave.
How much extra, Paul, did you say option 2B might cost us?
Well, Dave, for the purposes of this evening, if you went with an option 2B, you would be able to basically allow Vermont Land Trust to apply for the maximum that NRCS would allow for.
Yeah.
And then from there, we would work to figure out how to pull out 5 to 8 acres, and that probably would be in the range of $250,000 to $400,000. Is that a good range, Al, for what 5 to 8 acres might be there?
Yeah, we've never really appraised it. I mean,
that's why I'm giving such a wide range.
It's a pretty wide range. I mean, we could kind of drill down on those numbers for sure. I mean,
What, lost him? So
Yeah.
Paul, that would be additional to the initial 300 and whatever, right?
It would
obviously
lower
the
the 300
first
a
option,
little bit.
2 is the most simplest, but the 2B, but hey, this, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically, I guess what I'm saying is, you know, it's going to take more work for us to get some numbers and some other things down the road because we'd have to maybe pull out some land from the NRCS easement, but it can be done. It could be done at this point. Like I said, it's more complicated, but I think if that's what the city, if that what meets the needs of the city at this point, with the option, you know, to maybe take a few more acres out of the project for the chance of public access in fee, you know, or recreation land in fee, then that's, I understand your position at that point.
So how
What's
far
the
out?
downside? Not
I'm sorry?
finding partners?
Well, I think I mean, yeah, I guess that's the, there are some, you know, recreation grants, as we know, through VHCB and other federal grants. I mean, I don't know the status of those. I can't, sit here and tell you that, oh yeah, that's a no problem. We can find the money for a fee simple recreation purchase. Paul and others at the city probably are more familiar with that than I am at this point, and how those grant funds could come to the city. But
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I mean, we even Vermont Land Trust, we hold easements on, on public recreation lands around the state as well. So
I guess, Helen, what I would say that the two downsides of the option 2B would be, one, that there is additional funding from some source, whether it's the city or somebody else, to acquire land that would be eligible for recreation. And then two, until that time, that land is up in the air. That 5 to 8 acres, if pulled out of the federal NRCS, makes that uncertain future for that piece. Now, that's not a huge piece of land physically, but it is land that may not. It's possible that no conservation scenario comes to fruition for that piece then.
And then what might happen?
And then who would own it?
Well, the current owners, Wild Turkey Divide, which is largely dirt capital, would be the current owner, and presumably if there was no option for conservation, which is their primary goal, then they would have to look to the broader market at some point.
So it could be developed for housing or something.
Right. That would be sort of the worst case scenario in the option 2B.
well, and Paul, I'll just add a couple of comments that, I mean, I'm excited about either option, because what it does is it guarantees us full access to that NRCS money for the federal grants. There's $915,000 there. That's probably, I mean, it's secure, and if we don't use it, it's going to be used somewhere else or lost. So
Right.
That's, to me, that's the great opportunity, is to leverage those funds. And
That works either way, right, Al?
well, it does, exactly, in 2 or 2B, exactly. Yep.
Except we have fewer funds in 2B. We'd have fewer because the acreage would be less.
But then our contribution to that will go down, but not as much as the extra money we have to pay to buy 5 or 6 extra acres, right? Do I have that right?
You're right, Dave. That's
Right.
the unknown. That's the unknown about how much money would be forthcoming, in another round of funding or whatever. But correct. I mean, we've also talked, and I think Jacob is on, and Brandon Bless are on as well. But we've talked about is the whole 5 acres necessary for 9 houses? Maybe not. Maybe some of that can be carved off as well. So maybe, and maybe an enlarged parking area. It gives some of those options.
Okay.
This is
Other
Corey Pierce.
comments?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Who is speaking?
This is Corey Pierce
Oh,
from Bread
okay.
and Butter Farm.
Oh, hi, Corey.
Hi. I just wanted to say that, something that we've heard over the years was, how this project seems on the outset so focused on a singular business or a few businesses at the farm. And I just wanted to reiterate and say how excited we are about this commons model, the Agrarians Common and the Agrarians Trust, and just say that our commitment to the work that we do at Bread and Butter Farm and into the future is truly community based, and that by going down this path of the Agrarians Commons model and holding this land as a commons, as Sheriff pointed out, is truly our intention and something that we're super excited about. And all of what you are discussing in terms of having a vision for the long-term future is exactly what we talk about here all the time, both from a food production standpoint, but then in terms of all ways that this community wants to be able to enjoy and learn from and just be held by this land. And so we're definitely hearing all of the needs and desires for recreation, for trails, for integrated agriculture among all of that and among all of the communities. And it's obviously hard to exactly know how that's going to come about, but that's something that we are all very committed to and talk about as a group. And and just basically reiterating all what you're saying. And this has been such a tricky process and continues to be a tricky process in terms of how to do this and make this happen. And this proposal, going along with our announcement of pursuing the Commons model, we feel is a great opportunity for the city of South Burlington to further partner with this as a true community resource that connects and brings together the entire southeast quadrant of our city. And I can speak from being someone who lives here with children who bike and are mobile. We're pretty isolated down here because we can't really access the trails and the bikes and the playing fields and all of that. And it would be amazing to bring that together for the whole southeast quadrant communities. And that's clearly the vision and something that we're super committed to. So I just wanted to say that.
Great. Okay. So is there, Alan, is there a time limit? Is it 2026 where we would have to find additional dollars, either from city money or, contribution or different funding sources to pay for this kind of carve out?
Well, the 2026, as I understand it, that date is how far the right of first refusal. It expires in 2026. That would be carried forward with the full contribution from the city. So it could be faster than that. I guess we'd have to really, like I said, do some analysis, do some studies about what kind of recreation needs might be needed, or what, how much land basically, because I can't put the recreation piece in with the NRCS. I think we've explained this before, maybe last time.
Right.
That's a separate easement. They need the agricultural easement, so we would have to figure out really how much extra land we may be talking about, and then I don't know if I haven't heard of any definite timeline. There's definitely a timeline on using the NRCS money. We pretty much have to wrap that up by the spring. By March, it expires in March. So the timing on this is perfect. Well, nothing's quite perfect, but next week I have to submit the final application to VHCB to sort of lock in that federal money, knowing that the city is behind this. I think, then we'll be on a pretty good path. But as far as the timeline, I'm not answering your question that well, Helen, about the other land that might come out and how much you might have to pay. That could take a while.
I think, Helen, that's really a question to work with Dirt Capital on, because they would be they're the owners along Wild Turkey Divide / Dirt Capital. They were participating with us in putting together these 3 options for you. And Jacob, I think you're on the line. I presume that would mean that we'd work in good faith towards that goal for a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, like I mentioned to you earlier, Paul, our goal here from the outset has been to be kind of an interim owner of this parcel and allow both the city and Bread and Butter Farm to conserve it and steward it for the long term. And so, we would, continue to work collaboratively with, with you if kind of increased recreation on that northern portion of the site was what the city wanted to do. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know enough about the different funding sources to answer kind of how long we'd be comfortable allowing that process to take. But I think we could. I think kind of 2026 feels like a long way away. I'd hope that, like we were talking about earlier, Paul, that, we're very happy to kind of wrap up our involvement here and exit sooner, to the extent that, funds can be available to buy out our interests.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like people are interested in pursuing option 2B, which is committing the $309 $100,000 and all the other aspects of plain old option 2, and then
Ellen?
the part in B that.
Ellen, I'm
work-
an option 1 guy. I'm an
You're
option 1
option
guy.
1.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer option 2. I find it to be far away for playing fields. You know, as I try to cut down on traffic, I just.
Well, it depends where you live. For the people down there, it's real close by. They look at the reverse, right?
Yeah, but the people down there are few and far between, right? It's not the densest part of our city, and that's by design. And I don't know that trekking out to that parcel of land is good planning. I mean, I just put that out there. I will support 2B if that's where the majority is, but I just, it's far away.
Okay. Tom, shouldn't it?
I'm a option 1 or 2B guy. I'm kind of split between the two. I'm concerned that if we commit these resources, we're going to leave ourselves in a bad negotiating position for other parcels that might come on the market. And as for the middle ground, the 2 solution, my hesitations are the same as before. As much as Bread and Butter Farm is a great partner, a great community member, I'm thinking 50, 100 years out. And we just don't know where Bread and Butter Farm will be those years out. And I have reservations about a permanent agriculture conservation easement. I just think that our grandkids and our great grandkids might want to do something else. And I want to give them the rights. I want to retain those rights to put a petting zoo or God forbid, a city pool. No, sorry, I like to go with the pool jokes a lot. So I am not in that middle 2 option, but I could support option 1 to retain, because I also, Paul, you didn't elaborate, but it seemed like option 1 is not the end of the world. There are pathways in option 1 that will still achieve a lot of our goals, but I could get behind option 2B with more information.
Yeah, I just have to say that global warming is real, and 100 years out, I don't know what we're going to be facing. I don't think.
I wouldn't worry about it tonight.
Well, if that's what we're thinking is 100 years out, I'm trying not to lose sleep over it. I agree with you, Dave, but I think agriculture is going to be pretty handy 100 years out from now. So I wouldn't sneeze at it at all. I think it's a priority.
I agree with you. Right now, I'm more concerned whether we can get rid of coronavirus fast. I'm more of an immediate person. I'm 2B. I think I've always thought, as most of you folks know, and having been part of the arenas since their inception, recreation is so critically important to everybody in the city, especially to the youth of the city, that if we have the opportunity to carve out an additional recreation opportunity that all can enjoy in a location that doesn't offer much in that area right now, and we don't have to commit to that for a while until we can figure out how to finance that or pay for it, then I'm good for 2B. I think that makes the most sense and will be for the betterment of the community.
Ellen?
Okay, yes.
So I was excited and happy that the city council voted to enter into the agreement to conserve the 3 properties as partners with Dirt Capital and Bread and Butter Farm and the Land Trust. And I thought that was an excellent opportunity. And we committed the $606,000 and we did our part of the deal to make that whole deal happen. We were asked and we played our role and we did our part. But now there are other lands that we need to be prepared to possibly participate in another conservation project or purchase outright. And I don't want to spend any more funds on that section of the Southeast Quadrant. I think we should be done with it and move on to other properties. When we started the discussion with Bread and Butter and came upon the $606,000 value, that was at our time, there were some options we could have in the future, but we made the commitment for that money. And I think that we should stop there and proceed on to other properties. That all 3 parcels have been effectively conserved because of the deal that we did. And I think we should move on.
Let me ask a question then, again, if I might. Paul, can you put those options back up again, please? If we went with option, because I understand what you're saying, Tim, share the same concerns. I sometimes forget that money doesn't grow on trees. Wish it did. Scroll up to option 1, can you? Fire council. So does that preclude, if we went with option 1, does that screw up a couple of years down the road the potential of doing anything further? Or does option 1 basically say, we're not doing anything further for now, but we may revisit that a couple of years down the road? I'm not clear on that, sorry.
I think, and Al, feel free to weigh in here, but I think the two results of option 1 on the downside would be that the NRCS is prepared to make a contribution of $915,000 now. That's that money is applied for on a statewide basis, and the likelihood of this property sort of making it to the top of the heap again for a future round is less likely than currently.
Okay, that's where I needed the clarification. Thanks.
And then
Paul,
the second piece, yeah.
Well, no, it's less likely. I'd say it's very, very unlikely because this is the largest grant. I mean, the other thing I'm just going to point out, and I'll let you guys continue with your discussion, is NRCS is also in quite a bit on the parcel C, which we haven't conserved. The only parcel that the feds did not participate in was parcel A, which is already conserved, and that was entirely state funded. So anyway, but yeah, just to answer your question, Dave, a little bit, I think like this is the time. I don't think, and for us to conserve, you know, the bulk of that parcel is now. We're not going to probably be able to get that money back at a later date.
I think the other downside of option 1 is that there may very well be a sale and development of about 16 acres of neighborhood residential, precisely in the area that we don't, you know, is far away from everything. You know, and I stand with supporting this. I think we need to draw down the federal dollars. They won't come around again soon. Of all the parcels we look at, this to me, like I said last time, is about as important a piece as we can imagine in this community. You know, when you think about that whole parcel and you add on to it what Williston and Shelburne have and the University of Vermont have conserved, it's just incredible. It will never happen again in our lifetime or anyone's lifetime. You know, once the land is gone and developed, it's gone.
I'm fine. I just needed clarification on that because I didn't quite understand.
So I would support 2 as my first choice, like Megan. But if to get to yes, we need to do T2B, I would support that. So if someone is interested in making a motion, if you've had enough conversation, you know, I think time is of essence. Alan has to get his proposal in, so we need to make a decision tonight on this.
Well, with all due respect to Tim's thoughts, which I understand, I will make a motion that we go with option 2B because I think it offers us the most opportunity going forward to do as much as we possibly can with the land, and we don't have to lay out any additional money right off. So I would move that we proceed with option 2B.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. Megan?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Tim?
Nay.
And chair votes aye, so we have adopted 4B 4-1. Thank you, everyone, for all your work. And I mean, I think it was a really good conversation, and I think we moved closer to some very exciting things that could happen with that property, not just recreation, but really as a, like, even a little business incubator in terms of, you know, the Vermont Agrarian Commons and what this property can do for us. So I thank you.
And as a last resort, maybe Tom would even be satisfied with a swimming pool down there, right, Tom?
That would be fabulous, Dave.
Doesn't matter to you where it goes, as
Yeah,
long as it goes, right?
that's really centrally located. Okay. So
Well, thank
now
you.
we're gonna move on. Thank you all.
Yep.
To
And
item 10, which is a public hearing. Ugh, we were supposed to, that was warned for 7:30. I apologize. These are the development land regulation amendments, LDR 19-13A and LDR 19-13B. And we have Jessica Luisos, the Planning Commission Chair, as well as Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. So,
Was there any particular order you wanted us to go in, Helen, or should we just give an overview of what's in here?
Yep, no, an overview would be great. I thought your committee report was good. I mean, I thought all the materials that were sent out were very informing.
Great. Paul, did you have anything right off?
No, just that this was a collaborative effort started by the Affordable Housing Committee. They spent quite some time on it. They had originally presented to council a year and a half ago on that. And as the Planning Commission project, as it moved over to the Planning Commission and we held public hearings, there was some work sessions with the private sector to work out some kinks with it before the Planning Commission voted it to you all. And they voted it with no dissenting votes to you.
Great. So I think there was quite a bit of information in your packets already, including all of the details. So I think what might be helpful is I can give a kind of general overview of what's included. And I am going to follow kind of the general order that was in the summary memo in the packet. But in addition to that, there was also a full red line version as well as a report on kind of how it relates to our community goals and comprehensive plan items. So in general, there are some, it would expand the inclusionary zoning area. Currently, we do have inclusionary zoning in the city center form-based code district. So this would expand it to the transit overlay district and some adjacent areas, all of which are currently exempted from the interim zoning. So basically what inclusionary zoning means is that any development projects, which would include 12 or more new dwelling units, would, as part of the development plan, provide affordable housing in perpetuity. And it does include some definitions of what that means in relation to household area median income, the AMI, and that would be eligible to households at or below 80% of that AMI. And then the number of units is varies a little bit, whether it's a rental, 15% of homes, or if it's an ownership unit, 10% of homes. One thing that is a little bit of a change here is the definition for some of the units. You can see in the notes here, there's kind of a range of eligible households between 80% and 100%. And I'm not an expert on this, but the idea is that it's very difficult to find a household who is at that perfectly narrow qualification range. And if their income changes, they might wind up out of that eligibility range very quickly. So this definition change is to make the program more applicable and just work more smoothly. So as part of any inclusionary zoning, state law does require that the city provides some offsets to accommodate the developer's provision of the units. So there's a few different things that are included here. There's a reduction of parking requirements, as well as some additional market rate units. So for rental inclusionary units, that's one additional market rate unit. or for owner inclusionary units, you would get 2 additional market rate units as the offset. There's also some density increases, as well as some alternatives, including dedicating land in lieu of constructing the units. Let's see. There is one thing that we were concerned about was that you might wind up with all very small units. So there is a provision for if someone's going to provide like a larger unit, say a 4-bedroom unit, instead of a smaller unit, you can actually get credit. It would count as more than one inclusionary unit. And this would apply to any projects that are submitting to the preliminary plat or site plan review level. So that would, as I said, there's only a certain area of the city that those provisions would apply for. Then in those other areas, there's some of the city. So the areas where we're not proposing to have inclusionary zoning apply, there's a few adjustments to the affordable housing density bonus program. And this is something that's the affordable housing density is in our land development regulations currently. So these are just a few adjustments to kind of make the definitions consistent, as well as make sure that we don't wind up with a lot of very, very small affordable units. So I think that that's a general overview. And if you did read through down to the report, there is a kind of an analysis that was done to make sure that all of these changes are consistent with our comprehensive plan goals and strategies, and specifically relates these changes back to those goals and strategies. So I think that is the general overview, and we can take questions, or Paul, I don't know if there's something that you'd want to, that I missed.
No, that was good. I have one very small question, and I was just curious in the definitions. You redefine the household and as to include 1 to 4 unrelated adults. And I guess I just wanted to understand in terms of affordable housing, what we really mean by up to 4 unrelated adults. I don't know who that covers, because we've certainly talked in the past that, you know, just with some of the zoning and the rentals, we have limits on, you know, unrelated adults.
So Helen, that's a great question. The definition of household insofar as the 1 to 4 unrelated individuals is not proposed to be changed. It is the it's the remainder of the definition that talks about adding household size for calculating the what's considered affordable. But to your question, to your specific question, different communities around the country define a household differently, and this has been sort of an evolution in South Burlington to get to this point. Looking back in history, there's been a lot of different definitions, but it's essentially what's the number that makes for a single operating unit. So 2 roommates live together, they're a household even though they're not married or related. Our current definition allows for up to 4 people in any combination. So it could be 4 people that don't know each other, or maybe it's a parent and 2 children and then 1 other person. So that would also be 4 unrelated people. And that's what we've had in place since, I think it's the late 70s that we've had that number in.
So to get to the 4 unrelated, it sounded like in that example, 3 were related, and then
right, but 1 was not. So then it's the totality of 4 that are not related.
Okay.
right? So it can't be one family of three
Right.
and one family of three. That would be 6 that are not all related to one another. It's either 4 that are, it's either everybody is related to one another or it's 4 total. Yeah. And it's a tricky standard, I will say, because it's we're not in most homes at most times.
Right. Well, when you describe it that way, it's not tricky to me because there's so many
Right.
divorces. So it's very common, I think, to have a mother and 2 children or 3 children, and then have a partner who lives with them, who isn't related to the kids or her, but they're forming some kind of family structure of some sort. Okay, are there any other questions? No? Well, I guess from the public, are there any comments or questions from the public? This is a public hearing. Oh, wait, we should have opened the public hearing. I didn't vote on that.
I think we were open.
You opened it in May, Helen, so you're okay
Oh,
to just
okay,
be
so the
continuing.
continuation, all right. So Sandy Dooley.
I just want to express gratitude to Paul and other staff members, to the other members of the.
Sandy, I can't hear you. Can you speak up, please?
Okay, I'll turn my, hold on.
I think it's my computer, but.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to thank all the members of the Affordable Housing Committee, the Planning Commission, the staff, Regina Mahoney of the Regional Planning Commission. There were several developers that came and worked with us. I also especially wanted to thank the council because you put forth the money to allow Regina to help us, and she was fabulous. I'd like to thank Monica Ospey, who's the liaison from the Planning Commission to the Affordable Housing Committee. So it just was a long effort, and it's great to reach this culmination.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. That was good to acknowledge everyone. It was definitely a huge group effort.
It was over multiple meetings. So I guess we can close, if there's no other questions or comments, we can close this public hearing.
I move that we close this public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the public meeting is closed. We can move on to item 11, which is the possible adoption of the Land Development Regulation Amendments LDR 1913-13A and LDR 19-13B. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt LDA regulation amendments LDR 1913A and LDR 1913B.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, is there any further discussion? You ready for the vote? I'll call the roll. Megan Emery?
Aye.
Tom Chittenden?
Aye.
Dave Kaufman?
Aye.
Tim Barrett?
Aye.
And Helen really votes aye. So these are adopted 5-0. Thank you very much for all your hard work, Jessica, and everyone else involved, and Paul. And thank you. Okay, moving on to item 12. This hearing has been continued to July 20th. Do we need a motion to do that? Or have we already done it?
No, staff took the action to continue it, so it was
Okay.
advertised for tonight, so we just wanted to let everybody know, but we took the action to continue it with
Okay.
the applicant's concurrence.
Great. Good enough. All right, so we can move on to item 13. And those are interviews for the final open slots. let me get to them on my. Oh, that's right. I have to go back. They're in a separate thing. So we are going to, where are the applications? There we go. Okay, is that the first one? Okay, the first person we'll hear from, and I apologize, you've been hanging around for quite a while, but this was a busy evening. Our first person is Lauren Ballard Hatch. And Lauren, are you here?
I don't see her, Helen. I haven't seen her tonight.
Okay, so let's move to the second one, Christopher Trombley. I know he's here. Hi, Chris. And
hi,
Chris
good evening, everyone.
in either affordable housing or recreation and parks. And first of all, thank you very much for your interest in dedicating, volunteering your time to the work of the city. All of these committees really are helpful to the council. Why don't you tell us, you've identified, you work at People's United and you have bank and you've been on different community block grant committees in the city of Burlington. Tell us why you're, which is like number one choice? I mean, you've had to put one or two, but is there one that you prefer over the other, or you want to tell us why either one would be interesting to you and what kind of skills you would bring to the table?
Yeah, sure. So everyone can hear me okay, I assume. So Chris Trombley, I'm newer to South Burlington, so as you can see my application, I have some nonprofit experience from the city of Burlington. Affordable housing really is where my passion is. I think from a personal level, I've had some family that that struggle to find affordable housing and kind of move their way up economically. I think we both know, or we all know, that some of the baselines to kind of rise up from a lower income is access to affordable housing and a quality education. And I think with South Burlington, there are some opportunities that are coming up where we want to preserve our open space while also trying to provide an offset to the increasing demand for affordable housing. The Fed considers 31% of our gross monthly income to be max affordable. If you're only making $15 an hour, that's a hard task, especially as a family. So, I look to draw upon most of my experience from the Neighborhood Planning Assembly and my experience with the Community Development Block Grant. In those instances, we looked at grant requests, especially with the CDBG, grant access to, say, for example, inclusionary zoning. They were building new affordable housing out North Avenue, and they were asking for some federal money to help subsidize bring that access for seniors and lower income households. But also, I think, we need to think outside of just throwing more money at the programs. I think, whether that's accessory dwelling, we've taken another look at Act 250. Maybe it's just being smart about where we put our affordable housing, whether it's, it's close to multimodal transportation and access to parks and open space in our schools. I think the other part that's critical is stress of public input forums outside of city meetings. One of the things that the MPA in Burlington that we did was we had the North Avenue Co-op come out. They were a mobile home park that converted to ownership within the park, and that model really lifted the quality of the housing that was accessible, and that kind of affordable housing for residents really filled a big need in there. So that's kind of my opening statements. I am a treasurer on, with multiple nonprofits, and I do work in finance. So, my skill set would be, finance, and, aggressively learning some of the zoning laws included to be a contributing member. So I'll stop for questions. Thank you.
How about the Parks and Rec interest?
Parks and Rec is great. Well, I think, again, drawing from my experience with the Neighborhood Planning Assembly, where we were able to provide public input forums. And again, this is outside of city meetings where you really get that input, where what does the neighborhood really want for parks and access? You know, I have 2 young kids. We're new to the neighborhood. We're not used to having to drive to a park. Or the kind of facilities that are there, are they accessible to all income levels within the neighborhoods? Are they accessible to those of different needs? Do they connect the various amenities that we have? We talked about bread and butter earlier. How would you connect that with recreational paths so everybody can easily access those? So I certainly have an interest in that. My primary is affordable, but the importance of a strong parks and rec program in South Burlington, you know, it makes us a stronger community, boosts property values. It's, you know, everyone's just, you know, we're happy to come.
Okay, are you aware that the Affordable Housing Committee meets during the day?
Yes, and I do have accommodations at work that would allow that.
Okay, great. Other questions for people?
Yeah. Hi, Chris. This is Tim Barrett. I'm really interested in the degree of participation you had with that mobile home co-op project. Is that on North Avenue?
Yes, it is. So really the importance of bringing them to our monthly neighborhood meeting was, one, to connect them to the community to increase awareness of their services, but also to give them access to their city councilors who later develop programs where they use some of their discretionary funds to host programs at the park, such as recycling days, or they brought over the rover to dispose of, you know, paints and leads, and so that community connectiveness opened doors to that public input that you know, maybe doesn't come up in a public meeting forum like this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, again, thank you for your interest. Our process,
Great.
actually, you're near the end. We'll be meeting in executive session after this meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to make all our appointments, and then let people know, you know, if they've been selected into what committee in the next several days. So thank you again.
Thank you, Helen. Bye now.
Great. Okay, next, let's see, Robin Mailer? Is Robin here?
She was here earlier, but I don't see her now.
All right, we can go on to the next one. Dana Farr.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah, hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
Okay, so Dana, you're a returnee, right? You served on Bike and Ped and would like to continue.
Yes, please.
All right. Why should we continue?
Because I've got more to do. I think that most of the time when I was chair, we were focusing on the rec path, but my actual interest is in transportation. So I still want to continue on in that vein.
Okay. You certainly know how often they meet when we're not dealing with a pandemic. So any top issues that you think or changes in the way you go about work on the committee that you would suggest?
I think that we're making changes all the time. We've got a great chair who's on top of things, and he brings a lot of diversity in his own way of doing things. So I think that we're doing well on that. I would like to work on more transportation issues, though, with cycling, to make sure that it's not just a recreation, it serves multiple purposes.
Great. Well, that's an important concept or element for sure. Any other questions? Tim, you usually have questions for Bike and Ped.
No, it's summertime, isn't it great?
Yeah, I was just cycling today.
you were.
Oh, pink my cheeks are, yeah. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for your past service, and we shall be in touch.
Thank you.
Oh, is there anything you want to ask us?
How you doing? Enjoying summer?
Okay. We're trying, I guess. Okay. Thank you very much, Dana.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Ken Polito. Ken's here with a face. And Ken, you're interested in the Energy Committee. So, yeah, tell us.
Did we
why
miss
that's such a
Ethan?
big interest. Yeah.
Yeah, Ethan was before Ken, but we can certainly come back to Ethan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who came in?
Ethan has been waiting. He's, yeah.
Oh, did I skip over him?
Yeah, he's for the Energy Committee.
Sorry, Ken. Do you mind?
No problem. I'll go back out.
I'm sorry. Oh, now what happened to my thing? Ethan, okay. So Ethan, you're interested in the Energy Committee as well. Why don't you tell us what makes you interested in that, what you would bring to the committee? So tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've been working in sustainability for about 20 years now, and living in Vermont for most of that time. I've been up in this area for the last 10 years. I was working at VEIC for 9 years and left to go work at another company that does sustainable software development, energy efficiency software. I have attended several of the Energy Committee meetings since moving recently from Burlington to South Burlington. And I'm excited to see that there are a bunch of initiatives going on that I think have a lot of promise. But I think that there is a lot of work to be done when we look at the size of the challenge that we're facing here. And climate change is a very significant challenge that ideally we'd be working on at larger levels, at state and federal levels. But I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot more opportunity, frankly, for community level, town level engagement that can actually start to make tangible progress toward improving the energy efficiency of buildings, our transportation systems, food systems. There's a lot of different pieces to the sustainability challenge that are appropriate to work on at the town level. And I see that the Energy Committee is engaged in not only looking at the energy use that the town directly controls through its own buildings and vehicles and other activities, but also in the way that the Energy Committee can organize residents of the town to understand what the opportunities are, try to get people connected to the services that are offered by Efficiency Vermont and other local agencies. So I think that the skills that I have from the work that I've done over the last couple decades would help to bring to the existing enthusiasm and long list of tasks, bring some fresh energy to that, and hope I could help make faster progress on those lofty goals.
Great. And you understand when they meet, and have you been to any of the meetings?
Yep, I've been to several meetings until they all got canceled by the little global pandemic thing.
Right. Okay, good. All right. Any other questions, fellow counselors? All right. Well, thank you very much for your interest, and we will get back with you. So
Thanks so
thank
much.
you. Good enough. Okay, so Ken, back to you. I apologize. So you're interested as well, and you seem to have almost as many years of experience. Tell us what you would bring to the Energy Committee, along with hopefully a lot of enthusiasm.
Yes, so about 20 plus years of my whole career has really been in the energy space, mostly in the conventional side. And I will say I've gained some wisdom over the years. I am now a very big believer in the impacts of conventional energy, and I think we need to really shift away from that quickly. Like Ethan said, there's a very large scale issue, but I think municipalities are a great platform to get that citizen level involvement. So I bring, I think, very strong technical working knowledge of energy systems and the financial aspects of that. And I've actually done similar work. I did similar work for San Luis Obispo, the city in California, working with their municipal public works department on lighting retrofitting project as a volunteer. And we did some kind of HVAC type work for them. So those are things I think I can, you know, at a practical level help. What really intrigued me was actually the broad mandate. I just read a couple of the agenda of the committee. You know, you're looking at land use, you're looking at municipal lighting retrofit projects, EV, you've got this energy revolving fund you're looking at. I mean, there's a lot of things that excited me. I'm a new resident. I moved to South Burlington March 1, just before the madness started. My wife's a Vermont native, so I really just want to get ingrained in the community, and I think this is a good match between my, you know, professional skill set, my personal interest, and, you know, the community I'm calling home.
Great. Any questions from fellow counselors?
Has he attended any of the meetings? Yeah, has he attended any of the meetings or?
I have not. I've just joined. Like I said, I just moved to Vermont, back to Vermont March 1, and there have been no meetings in that time.
All right, Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah. Ken, do you have any big ideas for the city right off the bat?
No, I'm very curious to know, you know, from the municipal side, your large entity sources. So, you know, what's going on in the wastewater system. I saw some issues about the solar landfill solar project not hitting, you know, its projected revenues. I'm curious to know about what's going on there. Those are kind of the big ticket items I would, you know, look at. I'm also actually curious, although I don't have a lot of experience, in the land use issues, you know, the requirement for solar projects and, you know, new developments and how you think about incorporating that. What's the impact on, you know, the financing of those? You know, sometimes you can't get assessment, you know, proper assessment for mortgage on those solar assets. So are there ways you can supplement that? Those are things I'd like to look at.
That's an issue with condo developments. I think they have a hard time getting solar on the roof.
Exactly. And so, you know, there are outside funding sources to kind of supplement that. I'd like to think about how can we bring those outside funding sources to local development and overcome those challenges.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anything you would like to ask us?
You know, what do you think the support is for the Energy Committee's initiatives from the city? Is it an uphill battle all the time, or is the city pretty open to what they're trying to achieve?
Well, I think the city is relatively open. I think we have a lot on our plate. So I think there certainly has been some frustration by members on the committee, to be really blunt, that we haven't done enough. And, you know, just with maybe the energy consumption just within the city buildings. Administration, but I think you can point to a lot of things that we have done, and the councils have been quite positive and responsive, I think, to many of the suggestions. We probably haven't carried through on all of them. Anyone have a different analysis?
Yeah, I would just add that we really need very vocal people to just grab the attention not only of the council but also of city staff. As a resident, you have more access to city staff than we do. It's kind of funny, but that's the truth. And there's nothing holding back with you developing that rapport with key people who can help you achieve, you know, the goals that you as a committee have identified.
Great.
Great. Good enough.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Let's see, Dania Drukowski, is she on? I don't see it.
She was, she was. There was a Donna, but I'm not sure if it was named Donna. Yeah.
Well, how about, what is this? Oh, Linda McGinnis couldn't make it. She's been on the committee for quite a while. Sadie Mills, is she
Yes.
still on the call?
Yeah, hi, I have my mic. Can you hear me?
Okay, that's fine, we can. So
Great.
you are also interested in the energy committee.
I
This
know,
is
energy
great.
is hot tonight, I guess.
Lots of energy for energy.
So, tell us what you might bring.
Well, I've lived in South Burlington for about 12 years, and basically I'm really interested in getting involved in my community. Unlike your other applicants, I actually don't have a lot of experience with energy, but I am really interested in thinking about big issues and working on problems, coming up with innovative and creative ideas to help solve them. I work as a hospitalist at UVM Medical Center. So in my job, we problem solve and work as a team all the time. And this would be a nice way for me to bridge some of that experience with my community and to give back. So I think this is a great opportunity to get involved with a project that would really, I think, have tremendous impact, not only on our near future, but help us plan for a more efficient and more sustainable long-term future. So I think, as one of the city council members said earlier, global warming is a real issue and a priority. So, you know, I'm sort of reaching out to try to address that.
All right. Are you familiar when the committees start meeting again, when the energy committee meets? And have you ever gone to any of the meetings?
I haven't been to any of the meetings. So no, I don't know when they meet.
Well, it's usually in the evening, I think once or twice a month.
Okay.
And so your work would allow you to take that time?
Yep.
Or have that
Yeah,
time? Okay.
Yep. Right now I'm working in a consultant position, so I work pretty much during the day. So I could make evenings free.
Great.
Yep.
Any other questions by council members? Sadie, do you have any questions for us?
I was wondering if you guys had any new projects or any things that you might want to talk about as an introduction to the committee, or something that might be percolating.
Oh, what they might be working on right now?
Yeah.
Well, I think they've sort of not been working on much during the pandemic.
Okay.
But they're
They've been
looking to,
involved. Megan?
yeah, they're looking to reinvest the net metering credits, right, in order for us to really build on our energy savings and our reduction in energy usage. And there was, I think, some need for us to really develop, you know, a work plan, I guess. And the city did hire someone part-time, but I'm just, with COVID, it's been very hard to keep up to date with that. I don't even know if that part-time employee has been working during this time. So
is that right? Yeah.
Prior to COVID, there was a real, you know, I thought he was investigating our wastewater treatment plant, right? And all the different city-owned enterprises and you know, and buildings and what were our real consumption drivers. But since that time, it's really been you know, wait and see until we can get back up to speed here.
Are people still meeting by Zoom?
No, they aren't.
Not. Okay.
Unless there's some big issue that comes up. This round, we're looking to fill 4 seats. So I think, you know, in terms of setting a new agenda, it's probably a great time because the entire committee will need to have an orientation that really looks at everything that's been done, what was not completed, and what the needs are in the future.
Okay. Great.
So
thank you.
thank you very much for your interest, and we will be back in touch shortly about our
Great.
appointment. Okay?
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you. Let's see, can we go back? Let's see. Has anyone else arrived?
No, but I'm wondering, I don't think we've interviewed David Crawford, who is here now tonight. He's been on a couple of agendas, but attended the one agenda where he wasn't in our packet.
Right, David, do you want to tell us why you want to continue on the Natural Resources Committee? And
I presented the board with a comments. I'm echoing like mad.
You are.
David, are you also on a telephone?
No, I'm actually on two.
David, I just muted you. You seem to be on two different devices.
One off now, so it should be okay. Well, we'll just fix that.
Dave, you'll have to turn the microphone and the speaker off one of the devices or exit the meeting from it.
Okay, I turned off the mic. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we're on going. Thank you, Paul. Paul has been super about getting things going. Really great. So I did present the board with a thing back on the 15th when it wasn't working at all. Now what's happened is I've got it both on my iPad and a bigger screen on my TV, on my thing. So I'll be happy to answer any questions from either resume or my comments that I submitted to you. I thought that if I submitted all that stuff that it would be faster.
No, can you just tell us about your work on the committee? I'm just stepping in since Helen has stepped away for a minute here. And
Sure.
what you see is the kind of the biggest topics or goals that you would have for the committee going forward?
I think starting out with is I really appreciate the efforts that the council made on putting together the new revised mission statement for the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee. I think that's an excellent document. It's going to be a good foundation for the future. As far as my interests, I was chairman for a number of years, a couple of years, or I was co-chair and then full chair. And that's not something that I'm in a position to continue with now. I want to be an active member and all, but I'm not available to be chair again. It's just, it took too much out of me. So we now have 5 members. We're approved for 9. I really want to be an active participant in making the reconfigured committee work and be productive.
Okay, very good.
I'm hopeful. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm hopeful that that with the numbers of candidates that are in other committees that they may get filled up, that we'll be able to get our full complement from people that would be willing to. There's a lot of good candidates out there, and if they are asked if they want to serve on the Natural Resource Conservation Committee, I hope that opportunity will be presented to them. Because we really need to have the full board. Board in the past, we don't know what nights we'll be meeting or anything else, so everything's up in the air. No chairs. We don't have a chair. We don't have an acting chair. We got to reconstruct our whole operation.
Very good.
And as you know from my resume, that we submitted lots of experience in local government, in both and some in private government over the years. The rumor that I saw the dinosaurs is not true.
Okay.
Are there other questions from any of the other and Helen, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks. Any other questions or thoughts? You certainly know when they meet, and
Whatever.
Well, we don't know when they meet because new committee may decide to meet. We were meeting on Wednesday nights. Now that may continue. It depends on.
Right. Well, I think you have 5 openings and there's 5 people that have expressed interest. So
I believe there's 4 openings, Helen. There's
4
nine members total. We have 5 people now. One of the things that
the sheet said you needed 5. I thought. Well, we'll figure it out.
well, at one point we thought we needed 5. It was not clear whether I'm sorry, Emery's husband was continuing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I called him up and he said, yes, he did want to continue.
Okay.
So that's where that confusion came in, is because, our last meeting or next to last meeting was fairly contentious. And he was pretty frustrated, but he didn't resign. He just sort of stepped back. And when I called him up, he said, yes, you did want to continue, which I thought was great.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest and service.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff who's been very supportive of getting me back going. Just like Paul straightened out, I was getting best video on my desktop and better audio on my cell, or on my iPad. Wonders of technology.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I think unless some other people have joined us, that's it for interviews. So we can move on to item 14, the council acceptance of the IZ Open Space Committee report and consideration and possible approval of a statement related to certain lands identified by the committee.
Helen,
And
this is Paul. I have been in communication with our city attorney, Andrew Baldock, and he let me know that there's some tweaking of the language ongoing, and asked that we move this to the next meeting.
Okay. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. So we will take that up on the 20th.
And Alan Strong is on, so hopefully Alan heard that as well. The chair of this committee.
So Alan, yes, yeah. We'll let him know. You're on. So is that okay, Alan? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to sit through another meeting.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you for your patience already. So now we move on to the council consideration and possible approval of a South Burlington Public Library and City Hall sign concept. Is
Option
Alana
3.
going to do that?
Option 3.
Pardon me?
Right.
3.
What option
what?
3?
Option 3.
There's one option.
Paul, can you show, there's only one option.
Yeah, he's kidding.
No, there
No.
are going to be, metal against standing out. Yeah.
No, we were, Kevin sent us 3 separate font style combinations.
All I saw was this one.
Oh, you didn't.
It's at the bottom.
It's at the bottom. Go to the bottom. Yeah, there you go. Option 3.
Blow it up, make that bigger. I didn't see the bottom. I thought they were all the same one. Obviously, somebody else did as well. What typeface is the left one?
If Paul, if you zoom in on option 3.
They're all Berkeley old style bold, right? Except that the difference is in option 1 it's higher, and in option 2 it's lower, but the 180 is not bold, and in the third one it's bold. And I like option 3 because it's bold, bold, bold.
I see option 1, option 2. Where's option 3?
To the right.
To the right, it says option 3.
Oh, I see option 3.
Yeah.
This is on my small screen. I couldn't see.
The only difference is the 180 address number is bold font in option 3 compared to option 2. Option 2 and 3 are the same for the font and the boldness of the naming, but they're different from option 1 because they're lower down and a little bigger.
You
It
like
looks
option
like they have
three?
more
Tim?
space in between
3.
them.
3.
The lines have more space on option 3, which I like. You can read it easier.
Yeah.
I didn't vote with you on the last thing. I'll go with you. Option 3 looks great. Let's go. I move we accept option 3. Second?
Second.
Second. Okay, is there any further discussion?
No, we're all good.
Hey, David. Now, and these can be backlit, right? So, and they're gonna be out of this metal, so they stand out. Is that right, Alana?
Yeah, so they'll actually be lit from the front. For the record, Alana Blanchard. So
Is that a light bar? Is that the horizontal line is a light bar?
So the horizontal line is a glass awning. And I believe per the zoning regulations, and we'll be having that discussion, that they will need to be lit from above. So we'll be adding a light feature above the sign in order to provide lighting. This is the closest part of the building to the street because it projects from the front of the building. So we'll need an additional light on the front of it just to light up that part of the facade.
It's too bad they can't be backlit. With, but the letters are kind of small.
The issue with backlighting is then we would need a perforation for each individual
Right.
letter.
I get you. Yep. Hear you.
Okay.
We did, yeah. I feel like they've looked at this in many different ways. So if we could uplight it, we would attach the lights to the awning. You can just see it in that, in the upper right-hand corner, the awning. But we'll probably do a wash down the front. I'm not sure. We'll see what they come up with.
Okay.
Looks good.
I think it looks great. So we have a motion on the table and it's seconded. So is there any further discussion? All right, I'll call the roll. Tom Chinden,
Aye.
Dave Kaufman,
Aye.
Tim Barrett,
Aye.
Megan Emery,
Aye.
and Helen really votes aye. So we've selected option 3. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.
Don't go away. 'Cause
Yeah, thanks very much, Alana.
Question a little bit later. So item 16, reports from counselors on committee assignments. Has anyone met? Well, I haven't. Okay. Well, that was quick. Good. Other business. So Alana, we needed some information about the differences of the numbers on the bond bank materials. Are you adding them up on an adding machine? I don't think that. It looks like, it sounds like one of those old fashioned.
Someone's shredding. They're shredding all their documents now.
Ah, yes. Okay.
So the last page,
So she's got some feedback for you.
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I did reach out to the bond bank. I'm awaiting an answer from them. But in looking at the 2 different sheets, the bond bank schedule has 18 months and the one from our legal counsel has 17 as we've requested.
Months or years?
So,
That's years, Alana.
years. The term is for 17 years and that's with a principal pay 17 principal. It's 12 principal payments, 17-year term is what we've requested. And so the schedule that the bond bank gave us that's the attached schedule, that's an 18-year term with 13 principal payments. So I'll talk to them tomorrow and I don't see that they would have any issue with revising that since they haven't gone through the legal process for their underwriting yet. But my recommendation would be to approve the term and the amount and the documents generally as presented. And And then that way the commitment letter will conform with documents that Bitzel, Page and Fletcher have put together.
Do we know the interest rate?
We don't know the interest rate. I did have a conversation with Michael Gaughton today to ask him about the status of the bond market. Right now, he says that it looks good. We're at the high end of the market, and that's the stable end of the market for bonds. We're a high quality bond. And then interest rates have been actually, he said they're currently a hair lower than their best historic rate ever. This is a good time, he feels, to go in because, and this has to do with the timing on bonds, but apparently people have ended terms for other bonds, so they have more cash. And he feels that the supply right now is at a good level in terms of the demand for the bonds that he wants to issue for Vermont. He said we are 2 weeks out. So, obviously there's a lot that can change in 2 weeks under the the current circumstances. He said, on the other hand, everything that's been going on, the feds are now aware of, and they know what tools to use to stabilize the market, which initially they had to determine what to do. So now they're more standing by. Obviously it is an uncertain time, but his anticipation is that we would end up with a lower interest rate than we have had on other bonds.
Okay, so is the council amenable to voting on this and having that correction made later?
Yeah, I will move that we approve a 17-year, loan from the Vermont Bond Bank for $5 million. Is that, or should I give, is that clear enough?
Okay.
Alana,
That's the motion.
can you suggest some language that you want the council to?
I believe there's some language in the
in your statement.
In the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. So that would be.
Where is it, Alana? Because I didn't see that.
It's a consent agenda. So you would move to approve the execution of a commitment letter and legal documents necessary for the Vermont Bond Bank to issue a general obligation bond of $5 million to be serviced with tax increment financing from the City Center TIF district for the construction of the South Burlington Public Library and City Hall as authorized by ballot November 6, 2018.
So
But I think it had to stipulate 17 years, not 18. Am I right? That's what.
Alana, do you want us to include that to issue a general obligation bond of 17 years of $5 million?
For a term of 17 years.
For a term of 17 years. Okay, so Sue, you can stick that in where it would make, it would sound good. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, Tom seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the roll. Megan?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So we pass that, approve that 5-0. Well, that completes our work with the understanding that we will go into an executive session on 2 counts. So should we adjourn and then do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we using the same? Are we using the same link as we did at 5?
No, different link.
Can you give what's the number? What's the code number?
It's in the same email. It's in the same email.
Friday update emails is got all 3.
It's in which email?
My
Friday
update.
update.
Friday update. Okay.
Oh, the Friday update. Okay.
I
Do
will
we need
find
to make a motion to go into executive session, Helen?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Do we need to,
Yeah,
I'm
You
not
can-
sure whether last time we adjourned and then we went into an executive session.
Yeah, you need a motion to adjourn first.
Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so the meeting is adjourned and now we will enter, oh, we have to go to that other
So
website.
I move that we enter executive session to discuss appointments to South Burlington boards, commissions, and committees, and to discuss pending or probable civil litigation to which the public body may be a party, and confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to counsel.
Second.
Okay, second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you in just a minute.
Hi,
So
folks,
it's
I just
on the-
resent the email to you just now. So if you're looking for
Yeah,
the link.
thanks, Paul. I
That's all.
appreciate that.
Thank you.